Chapter 1058. Your Majesty, there's an urgent report from the Kingdom of Dawn. The guard walked into the office and placed a thick sheepskin bag beside Roland's mahogany desk. According to the messenger, Sean asked them to send it here. Oh. Roland could not help feeling excited. He put down the biplane blueprint in his hand, stood up and said, "Take it apart and have a look." It had been almost 2 months since the exploration team left Neverwinter. The last time he received news from them was when they crossed the border of Greycastle. Roland was quite worried when he learned that the source was not in Neverwinter. After all, mining and transporting ores was a long-term process, and the First Army's mobility was limited. The farther away from his sphere of influence, the more difficult it would be to control the plan. Now that he finally got a reply, he naturally cared about it. But what made him feel strange was that the parcel was so big that it almost reminded him of the express mail in the modern world. Whether it was found or not, a piece of paper could explain the situation. What kind of situation did the exploration team encounter to make Sean send such a big parcel back? "It's full of paper." Nightingale probably saw his confusion and whispered in his ear. "Paper?" Roland tilted his head and asked in a low voice, "Has your ability evolved to see through objects?" "I wish so, but unfortunately, I haven't." Nightingale said lazily, "I just put my hand into the bag when they came in." "So that's why." Her alertness is really... Wait, Roland suddenly felt that something was wrong. When Evelyn came in with new chaos drinks, or when the chef came in with a snack cart, would she also touch them like this? By the way, the amount of afternoon tea seemed to be a little less recently. "Your Majesty, it's full of paper." The guard's words interrupted his thoughts. "And most of it is covered with ink. What kind of new report is this?" Roland looked inside and asked, "Is there no letter that can be read?" "Please wait a moment." The guard poured out all the things in the sheepskin bag and finally found something new. "There's a letter sealed with wax at the bottom." "Give it to me." "Then these blackened papers, spread them out on the floor," he ordered. "Sean can't go to the trouble of bringing back a bunch of useless things." "Yes." Roland returned to his chair and opened the envelope. Judging from the date, it should have been sent a week and a half ago. Just like the bag, the letter was unusually long, at least 10 pages long. It was hard to imagine that a prospecting result would require such a lengthy description. Perhaps this was also the reason why the other party used the emergency method but did not use animal messengers after entering the northern region of Greycastle. "Your Majesty, Miss Ozima has found the source you're looking for. It's at the northeastern junction of the Kingdom of Dawn and the Kingdom of Wolfheart. The locals call it the Cage Mountain." Sean's first words put Roland at ease. Fortunately, this trip was not in vain. The mine was still in the Kingdom of Dawn, which meant that he could control the entire mining process through the Quinn family. Although it would cost him a lot more, it was better than being restricted by the Kingdom of Wolfheart and the Kingdom of Everwinter. Moreover, Sean's wording was not complicated, which made Roland even more curious about the contents of the letter. "But the source is not in the mine, but in a very ancient ruin. What's more incredible is that it doesn't belong to the underground civilization, nor does it have anything to do with the tequila fugitives. We once suspected that it might be the work of the undersea demons, but Miss Witch's discovery has denied this speculation. Your Majesty, this is definitely a ruin left by a race that we don't know about." Roland's brows immediately furrowed. An unknown new alien race had appeared in the 4 Great Kingdoms. This was information that even the Witch Union had not mentioned. Although this territory was barren and backward in the past, it did not mean that they would ignore their own territory. If there were foreign activities, it was unlikely that they could escape the Witch's detection. In other words, if Sean's conclusion was correct, they probably existed even earlier than the underground civilization. The key question was, why would this race be so interested in uranium ore? He continued to read. The builders left a large number of murals on the stone walls at the bottom of the ruin. The various monsters shown in the murals do not match the images of the foreign races that we know. Based on our speculations, Miss Rother and I believe that this building is very likely to be a place of execution. Not only is it located on the source of the mine, but the builders also baked the ore into bricks, which were used to pave the walls and floor. Azima found the same element in every corner of the ruin. Even the murals used a large number of mineral materials. Around the bottom, we found a large number of cages and bones, which are also reflected in the murals. They seem to have imprisoned a large number of enemies here, including not only the foreign races, but also their own kind that looked like the executioners. They then used the power of the source to torture their enemies, as if doing so could please their god. I have copied as many of the murals as I can and sent a messenger from the Tokat family to Neverwinter. However, due to the limited number of protective suits and the large size of the murals, the progress is relatively slow. The murals you see are only a part of it. It is estimated that it will take another 1 to 2 months to complete. In addition, I am very worried about Miss Rother. She went underground without a protective suit. I do not know if she will encounter the danger you mentioned. The local people had discovered the ruin earlier, but in the process of plundering, they contracted a strange disease. Many people died, so it is also known as the Temple of the Cursed. Moreover, judging from the purpose of the ruin's execution, this kind of danger should exist. Oh no, Roland could not help but whisper when he read this. What's wrong? Nightingale asked in the mist. Even if the gods' punishment witches are cursed, they can solve all the problems by changing their bodies. There is no need to worry about them, right? I am not worried about the gods' punishment witches, but Sean and Azima. He shook his head with a grave expression. According to the plan, they should not have stayed in the mining area for so long. Whether it was uranium or highly enriched uranium, the decay radiation was mainly alpha particles, which were difficult to penetrate the skin and cause harm to the human body. However, this did not mean that it was the same in the mining area. Considering that these radioactive elements had existed for hundreds of millions of years, some of them had decayed into more dangerous elements, such as radon, the situation became different. The half-life of radon was only 3.8 days. Radon itself was a gas, so it was very easy to be inhaled into the body and cause internal irradiation. Therefore, it had to be shielded. The protective suits he prepared for the exploration team were designed for going deep into the mining area. The full protective suit could effectively isolate a variety of highly toxic elements from the decay of uranium ore, and the activated carbon mask could absorb radon and other toxic gases. As long as they did not stay in the mining area for a long time, they could basically guarantee their safety. However, it would be different after a long time. The adsorption of carbon particles was limited, which meant that those who participated in the copying of the murals might inhale radon gas that exceeded the safety standard and receive excessive ionizing radiation. Chapter 1059. In addition to recalling Azima and Rother, Roland also wrote down follow-up arrangements. Safe uranium mining was a time-consuming and laborious task. Not only did it require detailed working procedures and setting up monitoring nodes, but it also required the workers to have a certain understanding of their own work and meticulously follow the rules. In the face of the imminent threat of war, Roland naturally did not intend to follow the usual routine. The North Slope mine was a good example. He directly purchased death row prisoners from Duke Quinn and stuffed them all into the ruins. There would be no pay, no holidays, and no protective measures for them. As long as they promised to work for 10 years, they would be released. Roland believed that those people would make the right choice between the gallows and a slim chance of survival. The lords would also be happy to exchange the lives of these scumbags for extra income. In this way, the 100 soldiers of the exploration team only needed to be responsible for supervision and vigilance, and the requirements for protection were greatly reduced. Sean was undoubtedly the most suitable candidate for management. Finally, at the end of the secret letter, Roland specifically asked his guards to find out the whereabouts of the treasure that people brought out of the ruins 100 years ago. After all, there were a few doubtful points in the rumor that concerned him. This race, which had never been recorded in history, seemed to have an inexplicable worship for radioactive elements. They used ore to make bricks to build sacrificial temples, used it to torture their enemies, and even swallowed the ore. The remains that were filled with green fluorescence in Azima's eyes were proof of this. Although it was not clear whether their extinction was directly related to this worship, it should be very appropriate to call them the radiation race. Of course, the world was so big that it was not unusual for any kind of civilization to appear. What was really strange was that whether they went deep into the mines or used ore to make bricks, it was impossible to cause flesh and blood ulceration. Even if they lived in the mines and were exposed to all kinds of decay radiation for a long time, the only result was a sharp increase in the incidence of cancer. They could have lived for 80 years, but in the end, they only lived to 66. After all, the efficiency of releasing nuclides by natural decay was too low. According to the rumor, the unlucky people who died tragically did not seem to have died of cancer or mutation complications. Instead, they seem to have been affected by strong radiation. In order to meet the latter condition, only high-purity nuclear matter could be achieved, and a large number of neutrons and hard gamma rays could be produced in an instant. However, this situation did not seem to be a level that the radiation race could achieve. Roland did not rule out the possibility that the rumor itself had distorted the truth, but there should have been more than one person who knew about the tragic situation of the villagers at that time. If it was true, the problem was likely to lie in those treasures. Only in this way could the ruins take on the role of the execution altar. Otherwise, every prisoner could live for more than 10 years before they died. If the altar was not built into a high-rise apartment building, it would not be able to accommodate so many people. It was a pity that 100 years had far exceeded the retrospective period of a xia. It was almost impossible to completely know what happened at that time, so he could only let Xiaoen try his best. He vaguely felt that the truth behind the rumors might not be that simple. After Honey took the letter away, Roland walked to his desk and carefully looked at the mural rubbing that was spread out on the table. Although the distorted ink images were full of weird and absurd things, he could still roughly recognize the subject and the object. Most of the subjects were located in the center of the paintings, with large and delicate outlines, representing the owners of the ruins. The objects were much smaller, filling in every corner, and Roland could feel the pain and fear from their ferocious expressions. This was probably the common characteristic of all intelligent beings. They always regarded themselves as the protagonists in the historical records. As Xiaoen said, both the subject and the object had nothing to do with the known alien races such as demons, demonic beasts, and the undersea civilization. Their shapes were really a bit weird. Some were like matchsticks, with limbs and tails indistinguishable, some were like wriggling protozoa, with all the organs hidden in the brain. The contents of the murals were not all related to the execution. Several of the rubbing depicted the scene of the subject and the object fighting. They seemed to be able to fly with the wind by expanding their bodies and take advantage of high-altitude maneuverability to land behind the enemy on a large scale to achieve a two-pronged attack. The towering defense line did not play any role. The city was turned into a sea of fire, and the object was defeated. As long as one could distinguish the respective positions of the characters, one could roughly understand the events described in these seemingly crazy records. Roland's eyes suddenly stopped on a picture. What's wrong? Nightingale noticed his strangeness. Do you feel that the scene in this rubbing seems to have been seen somewhere before? He walked to the painting and squatted down. It was the last part of the description of the war, countless matchsticks combined as one, as if they wanted to fight to the death, but were still beaten to the ground by the subject. Blood surged and converged into a huge lake. The surviving enemies fled to the seaside, but were all killed by the subject. Their bodies even piled up into a small hill in the sea. Well. Nightingale looked at it for a long time and said, except for the more ink used, it seems to be no different from other drawings. Alright, combat ability and art appreciation ability were indeed natural opposites. Roland put his hand on his forehead and said, help me get a map of the southernmost region first. Got it. The latter did as he was told and handed him a thick stack of maps. At the same time, he also handed him a dried fish. Roland bit the dried fish and kept moving his hands. Soon, he found a bird's-eye view of a part of the endless cape. In order to determine the location of the festive harbor, he had asked Lightning and Maggie to draw a detailed map of this place, so he still had an impression of it. When he put the two maps together, he suddenly felt a layer of goosebumps on his back. His body felt like it was electrified, and even his fingertips were numb. The outlines of the two maps overlapped. Although there were some differences in the details, the direction of the boundary between the mainland and the swirling sea was basically the same. The similarity was more than 80%. Could it be a coincidence? The place on this map is the southernmost region. Nightingale also noticed something was wrong. Isn't that the settlement of the Sand Nation? Roland did not answer, but quickly glanced at the rest of the pictures. When he saw the second-to-last picture, all the blood in his body seemed to have frozen. More than 10 main bodies were gathered on a high platform, forming a large circle around each other. An irregular polyhedron floated in the middle of the circle, with countless strange tentacles dancing on its surface, like the hair of a snake demon. Sean had not seen this scene with his own eyes, so he naturally did not know what was shown in the picture. But Roland knew. Chapter 1060. In the dim dungeon, the light from the fire cast a shadow on the wall, which looked like a branch of a tree. There was no struggle, no cry of pain or begging for mercy. Only when the whips intertwined with the shadow would the shadow shake and let out a low hum. But this hum would soon be covered by the next lash of the whip. Crack! Crack! The shadow and the flickering light overlapped, and the dull sound of the whip seemed to be the only sound in the silent dungeon. After more than 10 lashes, Earl Lorenzo finally said, "Enough, stop." "Yes." The executioner hurriedly stepped back. The back of the woman hanging on the scaffold was scarlet, and the crisscrossed whip marks were old and new. Obviously, this was not the first time she had been tortured. From the fine beads of sweat that appeared on her nose and arms, this type of pain wasn't completely useless. It was just that the other party used her willpower to suppress all of the cries into the depths of her heart. "What? You still don't want to tell me where the holy book is?" He walked up to the woman, clasped her chin, and forced her face up. She had a beautiful face, which was rare in the Judgment Army. Even though she had been imprisoned and tortured, it did not make her look any less beautiful. In other words, under the flickering light of the fire, her sweaty skin and flickering eyes added a touch of strangeness to it. "The church is finished. Farina, how long do you want to go against me? Even if you don't think about yourself, you should think about your companions who were captured." These damn stray dogs, Lorenzo thought bitterly. The kingdom of Wolfheart is so big, but why do they have to go against Archduke Island? Wasn't it clear enough that I executed those messengers? With a team of Scourge, as long as they did not provoke Greycastle, they could live a free and unfettered life anywhere they wanted. How dare they try to murder me? If he hadn't been careful and asked for a few more people from His Highness Maine, his head would have been hung on the city wall by now. Thinking of this, his missing left ear began to hurt again. That day when the gods' punishment army of the two sides was fighting, the sword that almost cut off his neck was cut by Farina. Fortunately, she was almost exhausted at that time and her sword was interrupted by her subordinates. In the end, she only managed to cut off half of his ear. It would have been fine if they had only suffered minor injuries, but what made Lorenzo even angrier was that out of the 20 or so Scourge that he had managed to save, only 2 or 3 of them were still able to move. The rest had either been killed in battle or were missing limbs. It was almost impossible for them to fight again. This was his capital to occupy, Archduke Island. The nobles in the kingdom of Wolfheart did not seek revenge on him, not because he had changed his identity from a bishop to a noble, but because of his limited strength. They did not dare to act rashly in front of Scourge. If this news were to be leaked, it would be difficult for him to sit on his seat as an earl. Lorenzo wanted nothing more than to hack him into 1,000 pieces to vent his anger. But he couldn't do that. Before knowing the whereabouts of the Holy Scripture. "I don't know whether the church is finished or not, but I'm sure you're finished." "Earl Lorenzo, no, I should call you a traitor." After a long while, Farina said in a low voice, "It's my fault that you didn't have enough scourge. But you don't have many left, do you? Otherwise, you wouldn't be so eager to ask where the Holy Scripture is. You want to know the secret of the Pope's inheritance, the method to create the God's punishment army to protect your poor position." Slap. A crisp slap interrupted her sarcasm. "Since you know what I want, you'd better tell me honestly," Lorenzo said, gnashing his teeth. "I'll ask you again, where is the Holy Scripture?" A trace of blood trickled from the corner of Farina's mouth. "I don't know, that's a pity." The Earl looked at the executioner. "Cut off a leg for me. I don't care who it is. I want this bitch's companion to stop acting." Although Farina was very weak, her tone was full of sarcasm. "Do you remember the finger you sent me last time? My blood was frozen and changed color. Do you still want to threaten me with it? It seems that the life of the bishop is so comfortable that you've forgotten the difference between a living person and a dead person. It was cut off from a corpse, right? You've killed them long ago, traitor." Lorenzo's face darkened. "And I'm not even the acting pope. How could I know the Holy Scripture? Maybe His Excellency Tucker Thor knows, but he never mentioned it to me. So no one in this world knows how to train the God's punishment army anymore." "You're lying," Lorenzo said with a livid face. "Didn't Tucker Thor ask you to come to the kingdom of Wolfheart to rebuild the church and avenge Hermes? Without the Holy Scripture, how could the church fight against Greycastle?" "Ha!" Farina laughed out loud. "Even with the God's punishment army, we can't fight against Greycastle. His Excellency the acting pope just wanted to save everyone's lives and let the rest of the people live in peace." "Ridiculous. Do you think I'll believe you?" The Earl growled. "If you want to live in peace, why did you attack Archduke Island? It's all for the money, food, armor, and weapons here. Tucker gave you Scourge, but you said he just wanted you to live well. That's ridiculous. You can't do anything if you don't believe me." "It's the truth," Farina said indifferently. "I also want to tell you one thing. If you didn't kill those messengers at the beginning, but refused them nicely, we would still have to go to Archduke Island. But you just had to make the worst choice. You should know that what I hate the most are two-faced traitors. You betrayed His Holiness O'Brien's trust, and you don't deserve the rest of your life that His Holiness Tucker Thor sacrificed himself for," she said firmly. "It's a pity that I couldn't kill you with my own hands, but sooner or later, the nobles in the kingdom of Wolfheart will find out that you're bluffing. Even if you take off the coat of the Holy City, you'll never become one of them. You're just a traitor, and your doomsday is not far away." Lorenzo took a deep breath and tried to calm his anger. "You're provoking me because you want me to kill you to prevent the news of the Holy Scripture from leaking, right? Don't worry, I won't be fooled so easily. You know, not only are the resources accumulated during the raid in the kingdom of Wolfheart stored here, but also a lot of instruments of torture, used to interrogate witches. I wonder how much better you are compared to those fallen witches." He glanced at Farina's bare feet in the air. "I think I'll start with your toenails. When I pull them off piece by piece, I hope you can still insist on your previous answer." After returning to the castle hall, the Earl could no longer hold back his anger. He swept the tea set on the table to the ground. "Damn it, damn it, damn it, damn Farina." Although Lorenzo appeared to be very confident, he did not know how long Farina, who came from the Judgment Army, could last. These tin cans were usually impervious to everything, so it would not be easy to pry her mouth open. The Archduke Island could not suddenly close the sea routes and ban trade, which would only arouse the suspicion of other forces. If they maintained the status quo, those merchants would be the nobles' best informants. Lorenzo urgently needed a force that could fill the gap in the God's punishment army before everything went too far. However, the key clue was in the hands of a person who could not wait to get rid of him. How hateful. Just then, one of his stewards came in and said, "Sir, I've heard an interesting piece of news recently." "No, I'm not in the mood," Lorenzo interrupted rudely. The steward glanced at the broken utensils on the ground and said patiently, "It may be helpful to your current trouble." "What?" Lorenzo looked up abruptly. "Tell me about it." Since he became the Earl and took the Archduke Island as his territory, his followers had also become members of the family. This steward named Hagrid was one of his trusted followers and had once served as the executive priest. He did have some ideas. The border of the Kingdom of Dawn seems to be restless recently. It seems that they're planning to march into the depths of the Cage Mountain again. What does that have to do with us? Lorenzo frowned. No matter which lord occupies the Cage Mountain, the Archduke Island will not benefit from it. Chapter 1061. The King of Grey Castle. Lorenzo shuddered involuntarily. The man, who had risen from an unknown lord of the border to the ruler of Grey Castle in just a few years, was well known in the church. No intelligence could explain how he had risen so quickly. Even the holy city of Hermes, which was about to unify the continent, had been defeated by him. Lorenzo could make such a quick decision to sever all ties with the church mainly because of Roland Wimbledon. In his eyes, the church and Grey Castle had become mortal enemies. If he still called himself a bishop, he could be destroyed at any time. If he did not take off his bishop's robe now, when would he? However, Roland had just ascended to the throne, so his attention should be on his own territory. Now that he had suddenly intervened in the border between the Kingdom of Dawn and the Kingdom of Wolfheart and made it known to everyone, his purpose was very suspicious. "Are you sure?" The Earl looked at Hagrid. "Tell me the details." "There's no problem with the credibility of this news. It has been verified by many parties," Hagrid said confidently. "First of all, the troops stationed at the foot of Cage Mountain are from Grey Castle. Their clothes and outfits are exactly the same, which is undoubtedly the style of that strange army. Second, all the condemned prisoners in the Kingdom of Dawn have been summoned. Not only are they gathering in Cage Mountain, but they are also serving the King of Grey Castle." Cage Mountain, condemned prisoners. Lorenzo paced back and forth. Suddenly, his eyes flashed. "Is he here for that thing?" "Very likely, my lord," Hagrid replied with a nod. "No. I should say, it must be so. But how does he know about this?" "It's not surprising that he knows. The person who discovered the ruins only relied on luck. I've always believed that those ruins don't exist in isolation. They may have some kind of connection. And Roland happened to be ahead of everyone else." Although the church had not been able to find out exactly how Prince Greycastle rose to power, there were several theories circulating among the church. Putting aside the nonsense such as the incarnation of God and the spokesperson of the devil, there was one explanation that had a lot of believers: he had obtained the inheritance of a certain relic, and since then he had mastered incredible power. Even though the three archbishops did not care about this, there were many believers who believed that this was the truth. Lorenzo was one of them. Otherwise, what right did the other party have to be above the holy city? When it came to Cage Mountain, the most unbelievable relic was none other than the cursed temple. In the past, the God's Punishment Army had swept through the entire kingdom of Wolfshart with the momentum of thunder. The nobles of the kingdom of Wolfshart either died in battle or surrendered. Even the Queen of Clearwater and the King of Wolfshart had not been able to stop the attack of the church. As the former bishop of Archduke Island, he participated in most of the logistics and mopping up work, sending the looted goods to the front lines or storing them. During a plundering operation in Precipice Ridge, he happened to learn about this legend from 100 years ago. It was said that a group of villagers had stolen a batch of treasures from the cursed temple in Cage Mountain. Then they died one after another, and the treasures fell into the hands of the local nobles. The ancestor of the Earl of Precipice Ridge was very interested in this. He believed that it was not the curse that had caused all this, but the treasures that had been stolen. Therefore, after spending a lot of effort, he bought some of the treasures from the Kingdom of Dawn. After some research, and at the cost of more than 10 lives, the old Earl had indeed found a different artifact. It looked ordinary, but it could produce a fatal light. The effect was very similar to a curse, and it could be called a weapon that could kill people without leaving a trace. However, after a few attempts, it no longer responded, as if it had used up all its energy and became a dead object. Although the old earl had sent people to the border many times to search, and even took the risk of entering the temple himself, he had never found a way to restore it. Therefore, he wrote this story in his family history, hoping that his descendants could find the answer. The strange artifact was also kept as a family heirloom until more than 100 years later, when the church conquered Precipice Ridge, and it changed owners again. At that time, although this artifact had aroused Lorenzo's interest, it was also true that the family history mentioned that it no longer responded. After fiddling with it for a long time without any results, he packed up the treasures and threw them into the warehouse, planning to wait for the holy city to collect them. After all, not everything recorded in the family history was true. There were many noble families that boasted about their long bloodlines and amazing wealth. If they believed all of them, the church would not have been able to wipe out the kingdom of Wolfheart and the kingdom of Everwinter so easily. However, after the fiasco in Coldwind Ridge, the good situation of the church took a turn for the worse. No one cared about the seized treasures, and Lorenzo had forgotten about it. Now that the steward mentioned it, Lorenzo suddenly remembered it. If the king of Greycastle also came for the treasures in the cursed temple, then it was much more credible. The earl could not help but feel a little excited. "Go on." "Yes, sir," Hagrid nodded. Assuming that Roland Wimbledon got the information about the treasure from other ruins, then it's very likely that he knows how the treasure works, or even how to restore it. If we can find out this information, we can replace Scourge. That was right, a weapon that could release curses. Its deterrence would definitely deter the nobles in the kingdom of Wolfheart, and Archduke Island would have more time to find the holy book. Lorenzo stomped his feet. "Follow me to the warehouse, now." "Sir. I have to make sure that the treasure is still on Archduke Island. Since it's so important, we can't let ordinary guards guard it." To prevent the news from leaking, Lorenzo and his steward searched the warehouse for half a day. After eating a belly full of dust, he finally found the bag of treasures in an inconspicuous corner. The earl was glad that he did not ask for help from a third person. He opened the burlap bag and immediately noticed the strangeness of the treasure. Compared to the luminous pearls and exquisite statues that were also looted from the ruins, the treasure was as plain as a stone. It had a square outline, was no more than a palm wide, and had a very rough surface. Even granite, which had been polished twice, was smoother and more beautiful than it. If it were not for the sapphire pattern inlaid on it, no one would have been willing to bring it back. The Earl of Cliff Ridge had indeed mentioned in his letter that it cost the least of all the treasures to buy. But now, a square pattern on the stone was slowly flashing, and a soft blue light flowed from one end to the other, as if it was pointing the way. The two of them looked at each other and revealed expressions of ecstasy at the same time. The stone, which had not reacted for nearly 100 years, had actually changed, and Roland's men had appeared in the Temple of the Cursed. It was unbelievable that these two events had nothing to do with each other. If what they had just said was just speculation, after seeing this scene, the possibility had become very high. Roland had indeed found a way to restore it. "You have to go to the Cage Mountain," Lorenzo said as he carefully held the stone in his arms. "I don't trust anyone but you. You can have as much money as you want, as long as you can find out how to use the treasure." "I understand, sir," Hagrid replied with a hand on his chest. Chapter 1062. In a tavern on the dock of Archduke Island. Joe fidgeted with the glass in his hand and looked at the entrance from time to time. He had never felt that time was so hard to bear. Regret, fear, pain, and confusion emerged in his heart, but he could do nothing but continue to wait. It was only when a hooded man walked into the tavern and sat down beside Joe that he heaved a sigh of relief, but what followed was even greater anxiety and uneasiness. "How is she now?" Joe stared at the man's lips, afraid to see the worst answer. "Still alive." The man's answer made him feel at ease. "But Lady Farina is not doing well." The man took off his hood and said worriedly, "The bishop seems to want something from her. He tortures her every day. Sometimes I can hear her scream in the hall. Sooner or later, she won't be able to stand it." This was all expected, Joe repeatedly told himself. Since they failed to attack the castle, all the people who were still alive would inevitably suffer cruel revenge, and Farina, as the leader, would not be an exception. Moreover, the traitor hoped to get the whereabouts of the holy book from her, so he would naturally use all means to force her to talk. As long as she is alive. Although he said this in his heart, his fingers deeply clenched into his palm. He even dared not think about what would happen if he could not save Farina. Perhaps, even death would be an extravagant hope. Damn it! Joe thought regretfully. Why did I promise her? Why did I have to attract the enemy's attention so that the God's punishment army could break through from the side? Why did I have to retreat when the battle is unfavorable? I would rather die with everyone in the castle, so that at least I could be with His Holiness until the last moment of my life. Your Excellency. The man hesitated for a moment. Do you know what the bishop wants? If you do, you might as well give it to him. At least Lady Farina won't. He is not the bishop, he is a traitor. Joe clenched his teeth. What he covets is not in my hands. It has already fallen along with the Cathedral of Hermes. At the mention of Hermes, the man's face showed obvious sadness. May the gods bless us. He murmured. How ironic, Charles thought. When the old and new holy cities were still in existence, he was already one of the best among the younger generation of the Judgment Army. The people who came and went were all outstanding people in the army. They did not care about ordinary believers. Now that things had come to this, the bishop had betrayed him, and the priest had betrayed him, the only person he could rely on was an ordinary follower. Furthermore, his feelings for the church were even deeper than many of the higher-ups. If not, he would not have taken the initiative to look for him when he was on the verge of collapse. He was dissatisfied with Lorenzo's decision to abandon his identity as a bishop and call himself the Count of the Archduke Island. However, he did not dare to oppose Lorenzo because of his lowly status. On the night of the battle, he happened to catch a glimpse of the attacker's face. After that, he wandered around the castle and paid more attention to him. That was how they met. Joe did not even have to worry that it was a trap set up by Lorenzo. He had nothing left, and it was not worth his time to deal with it. If this man had been sent by a traitor, after several contacts, he would have already seen that he had no value and chosen to get rid of him. Unfortunately, this man was an ordinary believer in the past, and now he was just a low-level servant. He could do nothing but provide limited information to Joe. I have to go back. After a long silence, the man put on his hood. If I leave the castle for too long, the steward will be suspicious. The next opportunity to come out is in 3 days. Shall we still meet here? Ah. Joe recovered from his trance. Let's meet here. If there's any change, I'll have someone send a message to you. I see. He paused for a moment. Sir, please cheer up. If anyone can save Lady Farina, it's you. Me? No. I can't do anything. His mind was filled with darkness. There was no turning point or hope. No matter how he prayed to the gods, there was no response. Joe nodded his head numbly. By the way, the man took 2 steps forward and turned around again. Something happened in the castle recently. One of the bishop's trusted followers, Priest Hagrid, led a group of people to the southwest. I heard from the coachman that they want to cross the border of Cage Mountain. I think this information might be helpful to you. Perhaps it was too obvious that his words were meant to comfort Joe, and his voice became softer as he spoke. Indeed, it was normal for the Lord to send people to other territories. Even if Cage Mountain's location was a little special, it had nothing to do with Archduke Island. As long as Lorenzo did not take Scourge with him, breaking into the dungeon to rescue Farina was no different from a fool's dream. Yes, thank you. Don't mention it, sir. He put his hand on his chest and bowed slightly. That's all I can do for you. Cage Mountain. Joe had heard this term a lot recently. He poured the ale in his cup into his mouth and let the bitterness fill his mouth. But the next moment, he suddenly froze on the spot. Wait, Cage Mountain. Like a bolt of lightning cutting through the darkness, an idea suddenly emerged in Joe's mind. A possible turning point. Returning to his temporary house outside the city, Joe's eyes fell on a black book on the table. It was the will left by the last acting pope, Tucker Thor, before he jumped off the city wall. It was not the holy book that recorded the inheritance of the church, the method of creating the God's punishment army, but the entrustment of a dying predecessor. In the book, he told the story of human beings and demons, and the origin of the battle of divine will. This shocking secret stunned everyone, and they suddenly understood why Tucker wanted them to evacuate Hermes. Everything was over. She put down the burden and lived the rest of her life in peace. Perhaps it was because of this self-sacrifice that Farina did not want to see the church disappear. Joe knew clearly that apart from her feelings for Hermes, she still had a lingering long-cherished wish, to see Roland Wimbledon and his kingdom of Greycastle fall into hell before the church. But now, a turning point had appeared in the hands of the king who had destroyed the church. Joe did not expect Greycastle to help. It was almost impossible for those people to save the remnants of the church. Only by directing the spearhead to the traitors of Archduke Island could he have a chance. The news of Greycastle's sudden appearance in the Cage Mountain area did not attract his attention. There was too much noise in the tavern, and the church would no longer have anything to do with Greycastle. Until the believer's words suddenly enlightened him. Lorenzo used to be responsible for collecting looted goods from all over the kingdom of Wolfheart, and the legendary treasure in the Cage Mountain was not a secret. At that time, it was reported as a special seizure. As for whether it had been transported to Hermes, Joe did not know, but it did not matter at all. What mattered was whether the king of Greycastle was also looking for the same thing. The nobles in the kingdom of Wolfheart would be afraid, but Roland would not. No one could resist the attack of that terrible army. As long as he could get rid of the traitors through their hands, he would have a chance to save Farina in the melee. Even if he could not save Farina, it was better to be captured than to be tortured endlessly. Joe took a deep breath. If the outcome really reached that step, he would no longer hide in the dark. At least he could be with her until the last moment of her life. Because, he had always loved her. Since the day he joined the Judgment Army and met Farina. Chapter 1063. 2 weeks after receiving Sean's urgent report, the sun once again appeared in the western region of Greycastle. The months of the demons ended without any warning. This was probably the most peaceful months of demons in hundreds of years. There were no demonic beasts or gunshots. The snowfield outside the city wall was empty and flat. The thick snow reflected the dazzling golden light under the sun, like a flawless mirror. Therefore, this year's Victory Day was particularly lively. Many residents walked into the field before the snow melted, dug out a ball from the knee-deep snow, and brought it home to boil and drink, both for celebration and as a memorial. Only a few people knew the undercurrent surging under the calm. Third Border City, Book Grotto. Roland received the expected reply. There are no records of this, not even the documents left by the underground civilization. Celine leaned tiredly against the corner, surrounded by opened ancient books. The first record of the southernmost region was about 860 years ago. It was a travel book, probably written by a witch who moved quickly. There were only a few words about it, but it can be confirmed that the Endless Cape was already a desert at that time. It was the first time he saw Sarcoma look so tired. The three senior witches rarely sat down. They usually hung on the dome by relying on their main tentacles, and their thin tentacles were always dancing. But now, all the tentacles were hanging down, covering the surface like fur. At first glance, it looked like a radish that had just been pulled out of the soil. Maybe you should rest for a while. I want to, but my body can't stop at all. Celine smiled bitterly. Your discovery is too amazing. It can be said to have subverted the union, no, the entire recorded history of mankind. This was also the reason why Roland had long expected the answer. If there was a relevant discovery in the Union era, it would be impossible not to leave a word or two. After all, it involved the battle of divine will. Even if it needed to be kept secret, at least the entire senior management should know about it. The race in the murals might be older than he thought. 860 years was only a clear record of evidence, but it did not mean that the southernmost region was full of vitality before that. In this way, the myth of the Three Gods Emissary and the Millennium War circulated among the Majin people was more credible. At that time, the first battle of divine will had not yet begun. Your Majesty, I'm not afraid that you'll laugh at me. She sighed. We've obviously taken a big step forward in our understanding, but why do I feel so confused? It was as if he had lost something. This is all normal, Roland comforted her. As the saying goes, the more you know, the more you realize that you know nothing. In the end, all the doubts can be summed up in 3 questions. Oh. Which 3? Pasha asked curiously. Where am I? Who am I hitting? Who is hitting me? The sea of consciousness was silent. Ahem, all right, I just want you to relax. Roland coughed twice. The real answer should be who I am, where I come from, and where I'm going. Where do I come from? Where do I go? Pasha murmured. Indeed, these 3 questions seem very simple, but if you think about it carefully, they are not so easy to answer. If you change your position slightly, you will get a completely different answer. Oh, have you become muddled from reading too many books? Alkia could not help but interrupt. What's so hard to answer? I'm Alkia, from Tequila, and I'm going back to Tequila in the future. Isn't that enough? I think you're just fooled by him. This is why I sometimes envy you. Celine put her main tentacle on her head weakly. Sometimes, being simple-minded is also a kind of happiness. Pasha laughed and shook her head. Thank you very much. This does make us feel a lot more relaxed. But your reaction really surprised me. Not only are you calm, but you also consider our thoughts, as if you're not surprised at all. Because this world is full of uncertainty to me. Roland smiled noncommittally and changed the topic. Since we've confirmed the unknown battle of divine will and the existence of a new race, let's have a meeting. Such important news, the sooner everyone knows, the better. As you wish, Your Majesty. Pasha bowed her main tentacle and replied. The internal meeting was soon held in the castle's reception hall. The level of confidentiality was classified as top secret. The participants were all representatives of the United Front, and even the Minister of the Administrative Office was not invited. When Roland announced this unexpected discovery, everyone had a look of disbelief on their faces. He also gave them a 10-minute buffer, which was rare for him, so that they could whisper to each other at will. The battle of divine will was not unique to humans. It was very likely to be a special state of affairs, which was completely beyond everyone's imagination. If it wasn't for him, no one would have believed him. After the hall gradually quieted down, Tilly was the first to stand up. If this is really the battle of divine will, then where are the victors? Not demons, sea monsters, underground civilization, and definitely not humans. Where are they now? This was also the first question that popped up in most people's minds. Roland looked at Pasha behind the light curtain, and the latter nodded. I don't know if you still remember, in the records of the underground civilization, there are 2 sentences, magic power makes us extraordinary, and mastering magic power is the ladder to pursuing the divine will. We might as well assume that all the participants in the battle of divine will can use magic power. Then, will the victors raise the power of magic power to a new level and go to places we can't see? For example, the world in the sky. This was also the speculation that the 3 senior witches had racked their brains to come up with. Although Roland felt that there were many loopholes, it was better than a simple, I don't know. After all, not knowing meant nothingness. According to common sense, the more powerful a civilization was, the longer it would leave traces. The ancients used thatch and mud to build houses, which would be weathered into dust after 1,000 years. However, the concrete buildings of Neverwinter, even after 1,000 years, could still leave their outlines. A civilization that could win the Battle of Divine Will but disappeared after the war, and their existence could only be known from scattered ruins. This undoubtedly made people think in a bad direction. If the victory could not reverse the fate of extinction, it would probably affect everyone's determination to go to war. Based on Tequila's speculation, Roland could at least set a goal for himself. So the content recorded on the murals is at least 1,400 years ago? Edith pondered for a while. Then what the humans experienced can't be called the first battle of divine will. That being said, it's easy to confuse people by changing the name, Roland replied. So I'll temporarily call it the Battle of the Lost. As for how many times we've fought it, it's not important. Your Majesty, Barav hesitated. The expedition plan that is scheduled to be carried out after the beginning of spring, carry out according to the plan, he interrupted without hesitation. No matter how many unsolved mysteries there are in the Battle of Divine Will, we must move forward. Perhaps the war itself is a way for us to get closer to the answer, and if we lose to the demons, there will be no hope. Chapter 1064. After nearly a year of preparation, Neverwinter was now running at full speed like a war machine. Even the months of demons could not stop this new king's city from crazily absorbing the surrounding resources. The administrative office once thought that a population of 100,000 was an unachievable goal, but in just 1 year, the city's population had doubled. The injection of a large number of fresh labor led to the rapid expansion of various industries. There were 4 new chemical plants, and the number of machine-related processing and assembly plants was more than double digits. According to statistics, the monthly salary paid by the administrative office was close to 10,000 golden dragon. When Roland first came here, his largest income was only 24,000 golden dragon, after plundering Longsong's stronghold. In other words, the wealth that the Duke of the Western region had accumulated for half a lifetime was only enough to pay for 2.5 months' salary. Steam engines, paddle steamers, perfume, and chaos drinks constituted the main sources of income. These goods were sold to the fjords and the 4 kingdoms through the Joint Chamber of Commerce. Except for the remuneration that must be paid, the rest of the money was converted into a large number of raw materials and handicraft products. The money came and went, forming a delicate balance, and the savings in the national treasury had a tendency to shrink. It could be said that this was a very unbalanced development model, but in the face of the threat of the Battle of Divine Will, Roland did not have many choices. If he did not pour resources into heavy industry, the machine guns could not shoot freely, and the cannons would always be short of shells. Only in this way, he had spare energy to arm the entire army. The expansion of the First Army from 8,000 to 10,000 soldiers was only the foundation. The Air Force under the command of Tilly Wimbledon was also actively preparing. In addition, the militia recruitment requirements and mobilization bill had entered the drafting stage. These 2 policies aimed to improve the war potential of Neverwinter and forced ordinary students, workers, and farmers to receive the most basic disciplinary training, similar to the university military training in later generations. Although they could not directly carry guns to the battlefield, they could shorten the training time when there was an urgent need to replenish manpower. Because the specific time of the Bloody Moon was obviously different, no one could be sure when the Battle of Divine Will would begin. If the situation was optimistic, there might be 4 to 5 years, and the worst case would be about 1 or 2 years. For Roland, the biggest strategic goal at present was to turn defense into offense when the Bloody Moon arrived, so that the flames of war would burn in the enemy's territory. So the devil entrenched in the ruins of Tequila was a nail he had to remove. In fact, the transportation of supplies and personnel had already begun in late winter and early spring. This was the advantage of rail transportation. Even if the entire fertile plains was covered in snow, as long as the tracks were cleared, the war supplies could be continuously transported to the front lines. Most of the steel produced in Neverwinter had been turned into rails, and the railway lines hidden in the misty forest had also been laid. It could be said that the new northern expedition would officially start at Roland's command. Be it the army or the city, they were all ready to go. But before that, he still had two things to do. On the second day after the months of demons ended, Roland received Thunder's request to meet him. What? You're leaving so soon? He set up a relaxing afternoon tea party in the living room. While bringing Anna along, he also sent an invitation to Marjorie. For this businesswoman who was quite compatible with lightning, he could only do so much. Can't wait to explore the shadow domain. I knew I couldn't hide it from you. Thunder smiled frankly. Every moment I maneuvered the steel ship, I imagined the scene of it sailing against the sea breeze and breaking the waves. If possible, I even wanted to sail directly to the Selene. In that case, we'll have to face the risk of water and food shortage halfway. Marjorie shook her head helplessly. Besides, the Chamber of Commerce that invested heavily in you won't be happy to see you leave their fleet behind, unless you plan to never return to the Fjords Islands again. Ha, I just wanted to express my excitement to His Majesty. He touched his chin and said, as Marjorie said, this expedition is no longer just about me. After all, for the fjords, the development of new waters means opportunities and wealth, and every Chamber of Commerce will be tempted. This is probably the largest expedition in the history of the Fjords Islands. I have to return as soon as possible to be fully prepared. It seemed that after Thunder's publicity and recruitment, this expedition had changed from a team to a group. Roland smiled and sipped his tea. He was indeed the most famous explorer in the fjords. He could attract a huge investment just by showing his intention. It seems that in just a few months, you've mastered the steel ship. It's all thanks to Her Highness Anna. Thunder put his hand on his chest to show his respect to Anna. She helped a lot with the subsequent improvement of the hull. If I didn't see it with my own eyes, it's hard to imagine that such a huge iron ship could be more flexible than a three-masted ship. I also want to ask you for a favor. Anna nodded. During the trial voyage, this ship only moved in the shallow coastal waters. If it's possible, I hope to get a sailing report in the deep sea area. Any problems can be recorded in it. It's best to use Neverwinter's new waterproof ink and sealed plastic bags. That way, even if it falls into the sea, it can be completely preserved. Probably not expecting that Anna would make such a serious request, Thunder was stunned for a moment before he smiled and said, I see. Please leave it to me, Your Highness. Roland touched Anna's head dotingly and then looked at Thunder. I also have a favor to ask of you. Just tell me. I want to recruit a group of explorers. It has nothing to do with this expedition. Thunder quickly realized. Yes. Roland put down his teacup. I want them to go to the Endless Cape to have a look. I remember there was nothing but yellow sand and black water there, Marjorie said in surprise. I used to think so too. Roland shrugged. The Endless Cape is hardly dangerous, so there's no need for experienced experts. It can be said that the number of people is more important than the ability. Seeing that Roland did not elaborate, Thunder did not ask further. There are many people like this in the fjords. I wonder what the selection rules are. No. Roland replied. Actually, anyone can be an explorer. As long as you find a novel relic in the Endless Cape, no matter what it is, you can get a reward. Even if it's a brick from the ruins? Of course, but it must come from the Endless Cape, Roland said affirmatively. The more information the relic contains, the more generous the reward. This information is valid for a long time. As long as I'm still the king of Greycastle, it will definitely be honored. With your guarantee, I'm afraid that place will be crowded in the future. Marjorie covered her mouth and laughed. I'm wondering if I should take the opportunity to open a tavern in Festive Harbor. You're more than welcome. Boosting the economy of the oil port was indeed one of Roland's goals. After all, The civilization in the painting had a history of at least 1,400 years, and it was still unknown whether they could leave anything behind. Launching a reward to recruit people was undoubtedly a way to kill two birds with one stone. "By the way, Your Majesty," Thunder said. "Since the steel ship has passed the sea test and is officially put into use, does it have a name?" "Of course, I plan to call it the Snow Wind." Snow Wind. The explorer pondered for a moment. "It's indeed a nice name, but won't it be too soft and not match with its steel body?" Chapter 1065. The ship whistled and slowly left Shallow Bay. Joan stood at the stern and reluctantly said goodbye to her expedition companions. After spending a winter together, her relationship with the witches had improved greatly. Perhaps it was because she had not experienced the feeling of being cared for and missed for a long time, so the hard-won friendship was particularly strong. The phrase, "see you again," that she repeated over and over again was what she had learned before she left. It was the phrase she had learned before she left. Lightning looked quite lonely. She stared blankly at the stern of the ship, which made Roland want to tell her several times that Thunder was on the ship. But when he thought of Roland's entrustment, he finally suppressed the thought. Maggie covered her mouth, her shoulders trembling and her eyes watery. She could not say goodbye for a long time, probably because she was afraid that she would cry if she opened her mouth. Lorgar was the calmest. She hugged Maggie with her tail, held Lightning with one hand, and waved to Joan with the other. Death was a common thing for Majans, and she had long been used to this kind of farewell. In Roland's eyes, she was no longer the solitary princess of the Wild Flame clan when she first came to Neverwinter. At this moment, there was no doubt that she had changed, even though she had not noticed it herself. This was also one of the reasons why Roland did not tell her. With such a group of friends, he believed that sooner or later, Lightning would return to her former energetic self. The sisters who had been separated for the time being would eventually be reunited. The day after Thunder left, Roland announced through Greycastle Weekly that the new King's City would hold the first national sports meet. There was only one event, and that was long-distance running. The race would start from the main city of Neverwinter or the Longsong area, and the finishing point would be at the center of Kingdom Avenue. The total distance was 28 kilometers. The top 10 would be awarded 110 golden dragon, and the champion would also be awarded a commemorative badge by the king. This news instantly caused a sensation in the entire western region. For a time, everyone on the streets and alleys was asking about the rules of the sports meet. The momentum was no less than the release of the Magic movie. With a down payment of 100 golden dragon stones, one could buy a house with water, heat, and electricity in the residential area closest to the castle district. Apart from the local residents who had migrated the earliest, this was also the goal of most people in Neverwinter. Although the new King's City did not have the traditional separation of the inner and outer city, and there were no walls between the various districts, people still hoped to be closer to His Majesty the King. In the past, this goal would take more than half of a lifetime to achieve, but now it was possible to achieve it in one go. This was different from the Outstanding Contribution Award and the War Hero Award. The former were awarded to the masters of the industry. Even if they did not rely on the Golden Dragon Award, they would not be troubled by money. The latter required one to risk one's life. Courage and luck were indispensable. But what about the sports meet? He just needed to know how to run. Who doesn't have two legs? In the eyes of the crowd, this was another proof of His Majesty's concern for the people and his benevolence. What made many people even happier was that the previous generous policies were only available to official residents. This time, it was for all the people, just like the headline of the weekly newspaper. Not to mention the people of Neverwinter, even businessmen from other cities could participate in the sports meet. It was not surprising that this novel activity could have such a great impact. Of course, what Roland wanted to do was not just to enjoy a race and see who ran faster. The sports meet itself could strengthen unity and encourage people to challenge themselves and work hard. As the aftermath of the Victory Day celebration and the horn before the start of the war, there was nothing more inspiring than a sports meet. In addition, he had a small plan. That was to publicize the comeback of the bicycle. As a failure of the early policy, he had always been somewhat resentful. The proud invention of the King of Greycastle, the appearance of Barev's friendship advertisement, and the posters that were hung all over the square. In the end, only about 200 bicycles had been produced, and it had failed miserably due to lack of productivity. Not only had the factory been turned into a steam engine assembly plant, but half of the finished products had also been given to the workers as remuneration. Not only did he fail to realize the scene where everyone rode bicycles to and fro the various urban areas, but he had also lost a lot of resources because of his poor planning. For example, the special machinery for the production of bicycle parts had all been sent back to the furnace to be rebuilt. The remaining half of the bicycles were too small to be delivered to the First Army and were all sealed in the warehouse. It could be said that among the many projects he had arranged, this was the only one that did not bring any benefits. Of course, he had to find a way to erase this black spot. Today's situation in the city was completely different from that of 2 or 3 years ago. The crazy expansion had brought about a sharp increase in the urban area. The newly built residential areas were lined up along Kingdom Avenue, farther and farther away from the factories, docks, mines, and other major work sites. Walking had become a time-consuming and laborious task. The improvement of the city streets also allowed more places for cyclists to reach easily. Secondly, Neverwinter's productivity had also been greatly improved. Coupled with the application of the rubber worms and the new machine tools, the witches could be eliminated from the beginning, and the existing projects would not be affected. Now was the best time to introduce the bicycle. As long as the Second Army rode the bicycle along with the long-distance running team and acted as guides and rescuers, everyone would naturally find the advantages of this means of transportation. In this way, the biggest mistake he had made since he was in power would no longer exist. Roland thought confidently. Oh! Is this the great chief's city? Gwels Burnfire walked out of the cabin and rubbed his cheeks. This stone boat is strong, but it's too noisy. I'm afraid my ears will be deafened if I stay here for another 2 or 3 days. Father, are you really not going to cover up your tattoos and change into a set of northern clothes? Rohan followed closely behind him and said, those people on the dock are all looking at us. It doesn't matter. It's enough for them to stare. But are you worried about being discriminated against? Gwels glanced at him. If even the passers-by of Majin can't stand it, what kind of life is my daughter living? The great chief said that in his territory, everyone should be treated equally. I'd like to see if he's lying to the 3 gods. At the mention of Lorgar Burnfire, Rohan shut up and no longer tried to persuade him. The chief secretly shook his head. It seemed that his sister, who was so powerful, was still a knot in Gwel's heart. Gwels did not rush here from the port of Clearwater on a whim. The War of Revenge, which had lasted for 2 months, had finally come to an end. Under the command of Brian, the Sand Nation, who advocated the relocation of the small oasis, had won the final victory. The masterminds of the Silver Stream Massacre, the Wild Wave Clan and the Cut Bone Clan, had been wiped out. The 6-clan system of Iron Sand City had since become history. He was here to report the news on behalf of Brian. This kind of thing did not need to be done by the chief himself. However, because of the war, the Wild Flame clan had missed the great chief's coronation ceremony. Therefore, it was natural that he would be the one to deliver the news as a belated congratulatory gift to show his sincerity. Gwels was also very concerned about how Lorgar was doing. She would never write her difficulties in a letter. Some things were better to see with her own eyes. Chapter 1066. After entering the city, there was a sudden increase in the number of people coming and going. Although there were still people looking at them, it was only out of curiosity. Everyone walked in a hurry and there was not a single loafer on the street. Father, here. Rohan looked around in surprise. Yes. He nodded slightly. It was the first time Gwels had seen such a busy scene. He had traveled to many cities in the Northern Kingdom, and the most impressive thing about those cities was that they were prosperous. This was also a characteristic of the Northern Kingdom. The land and resources were far better than those in the southernmost region, creating many extraordinary cities. The only difference was that there was a mountain higher than the one before. He had thought that the great chief's king's city would reach a new height in this aspect. He did not expect that the first thing that attracted his attention was not the flat black stone street under his feet, nor the neat houses, but the people here. No matter how wide the inner city was or how magnificent the castle was, there were always homeless people, beggars, and rats lying on the street corners. They were like indispensable decorations in the city. However, walking in Neverwinter, not only did he not see those decorations, but the people's faces were also completely different from before. This kind of energetic look was rare even among the new big clans. Gwels had always thought that the Sand Nation was not much worse than the people in the Northern Kingdom, and they were even more enterprising because of the environment. Although the Northern Kingdom was rich in resources, the overly comfortable life made them indulge in enjoyment, and their courage and willpower were inferior. If it were not for the difficulty of gathering the power of the clans, they could have obtained a wider living space. However, now he did not dare to be so sure. That kind of pride and confidence that came from the heart was definitely not faked. Even if there were no firearms, it was best not to be enemies with a city made up of such citizens. Father, should we find Lorgar first or submit the document to the castle first? Rohan did not feel that deeply. Obviously, he was more curious than surprised. What's the hurry? If the great chief places us in the castle district, how do we test his promise? Gwels stared at him. Of course we'll stay for a few days and get to know this city better. But I've already decided, he interrupted. Huh? What are those people doing? One side of the square was filled with people, and the noise was rising and falling. It looked very lively. Rohan followed his line of sight and said, they are probably buying discounted goods from the peddlers. Go take a look, Gwels ordered. Yes. He pulled up his hood, and with the advantage of his height and length, he quickly squeezed into the crowd. Gwels could not help but feel a little emotional as he looked at his eldest son's back, which was nearly 6 feet tall. In terms of physique, he should have been the bravest warrior in the clan, but he did not expect that he did not like to fight. In the end, the one who held up the Wild Flame clan was Lorgar, who was not born strong at all. It was precisely because of this that the third princess became the heir in the eyes of the people, and Rohan had always been suppressed to the point where he could not even raise his head. They were obviously siblings, but they rarely talked to each other. It could only be said that they were born to be mischievous. However, the clan leader was still a little disappointed. Especially when Lorgar was the center of attention, Rohan did not resist at all. The Mahjins preferred the strong. Even if their skills were not as good as others, their unyielding will could still win the respect of others. At least it was better than surrendering without a fight. Therefore, even after Lorgar left, Gwels had not made up his mind to let his eldest son take over as the clan leader. Although Rohan had a good performance in other aspects, a leader who was afraid of competition could easily lose his original advantage when he hesitated. This was also the reason why Gwels brought his eldest son on this trip. He hoped to make Rohan change by increasing his knowledge. After a quarter of an hour, Rohan squeezed out of the crowd with a strange look on his face. Father, they are all here to sign up for the sports day. Sports day? Gwels pondered. What's that? It's a competition held by the great chief. I heard that it's to choose the fastest person in the world, Rohan explained. And the first place will get 100 golden dragons as a reward. That's why there are so many applicants. Ha, isn't this the same as the holy duel? Except there's no blood. Gwels clapped his hands and smiled. It seems that the great chief has learned a lot from the Sand Nation. What's the condition to sign up? Since it's the fastest person in the world, we should also be able to participate. We? Rohan was stunned. Father, are you also going to participate? Of course, I was once a warrior who walked through half a desert on foot and left camels behind me. I've never lost to anyone in terms of leg strength. Gwels said as his beard trembled. Why, do you think I'm old? Take me to sign up. Seeing that he could not stop him, Rohan had to agree. There are too many people there. I can go alone. It's okay. Father, Gwels glanced at him. Is there something else you haven't told me? Ah. Rohan hesitated for a while and then said in a low voice, I saw third sister. In the crowd? No. His eldest son shook his head. She was, in the painting, wearing clothes that didn't cover her body. People surrounded her and pointed at her. What? Gwels frowned. Was the great chief trying to humiliate her? After he wrote a letter to Lorgar, Neverwinter responded quickly. He thought that His Majesty treated her well. If Lorgar endured humiliation just for the status of the Wild Flame clan, then he would rather not have the green mountains and clear waters. Thinking of this, he walked into the crowd with a sullen face. The painting that Rohan mentioned was hanging on one side of the square. It looked very eye-catching, and there was more than one painting. When Gwels saw it, he could not help but be stunned. This is Lorgar. It was the first time that he saw his daughter so beautiful. She stood in the white snow, her white gauze and brocade fluttering in the wind. It was a court dress that Lorgar had never worn before. In Iron Sand City, she always wore the most suitable short clothes for fighting. Her chest and limbs were wrapped in bandages, and she was either covered in dust or bloodstains. When she did not need to fight, she would wrap herself up tightly and cover up her non-human features under thick clothes. This was what Rohan meant when he said that she did not cover up. Lorgar exposed her fluffy ears and tail, and as if she was deliberately attracting attention, she wore a sparkling ruby earring on one of her long ears. The bright color seemed to make the whole picture come alive. The people around them were not talking about disgust or rejection, but praise. This was also what surprised Gwels the most. In addition, during their conversation, he also heard a new word, magic shadow. I see. In the kingdom of Greycastle, everyone is treated the same. Was this the great chief's way of doing things? He turned around and slapped Rohan. Don't make such a fuss next time. It's just showing her half-wolf form. Your sister is not a monster. I didn't think so. Gwels covered the back of his head and felt wronged. Chapter 1067. Soon, Neverwinter ushered in the day of the competition. Although the first Victory Day sports meet was arranged in a very hasty and crude manner, with neither an opening ceremony nor live commentary, it was undoubtedly a grand celebration for the local people. As soon as dawn broke, people spontaneously flocked to the Kingdom Avenue, trying to get a good seat near the front. Since the snow had not melted, almost everyone had a small bench or leather felt cushion, and many families came together. This scene amazed the traveling merchants. The hawkers, who had predicted the situation in advance, had already carried their bags full of food and drinks and loudly hawked their wares with the crowd. By noon, the center of the avenue, where the finish line was located, was already packed with people. A conservative estimate was that there were about 10,000 people, and there were still people coming from both places. Once again, Roland had a taste of the people's passion for entertainment in that era. It was definitely not easy to walk 28 kilometers on foot. He deliberately set the competition time at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to give his subjects enough time to prepare, but he did not expect the response from the people was still beyond his expectation. As the king of Greycastle, he naturally did not have to squeeze with his subjects. As early as the day before, the Ministry of Construction had set up a stepped viewing platform that could accommodate 100 people for the high-level officials of Neverwinter. The First Army formed a defensive line around the platform, which separated the viewing platform from the crowd. Your Majesty, this is the list of participants. There are a total of 1,462 people. Scroll came over with a thick stack of paper. But due to the registration time limit, there are only the simplest classification and statistics. If you can give me 2 more days. It's okay. Roland waved his hand. The sports meet itself is to strike while the iron is hot. If it is delayed until after the expedition, it will lose the purpose of holding it. He casually flipped through the list and found that scroll was a little modest. The classification on the list not only detailed the residential area, but also the simplest summary of life and work experience. Scroll was probably the only one who could find such information in such a short period of time. In the list, he saw a few interesting names. For example, his old friend Yorko, Lucia's sister Ling, and the trio from the Alchemist Union, etc. There was no doubt that even if there were no witches participating in this sports meet, they would still have little hope of winning. Basically, they would go for the propaganda slogan of participation. Most of the people with the most hope of winning a place were concentrated on the first page. Roland set his eyes on the two people at the top, the Light of Dawn, Philin Eltek, and Chief Knight, Carter Lannis. Do you think the champion will be born between the two of them? Scroll rolled up her hair and smiled. She didn't answer directly, but her expression had already given her answer. Your Majesty, it's almost time, Barav, who was sitting in the lower position, reminded. Okay. Roland put down the list and picked up the telephone beside him. Let the game begin. There's still one thing I don't understand. Gwells, who was dressed in a desert-style combat robe, was warming up in the crowd as he jumped and muttered to himself, the great chieftain's city is divided into two regions, right? Since we're all running toward the center, how can he ensure that everyone starts at the same time? The most important thing in a holy duel is fairness. If fairness is lost, not only will the honor be lost, but the reputation of the great chieftain will also be tarnished. Who knows, and this isn't the point at all, okay? Father, Rohan said with difficulty, can you take off that hair band on your head? And the mink fur around your waist? He had never expected that after spending a large sum of money to watch The Wolf Princess, his father would be bewitched. On one hand, he repeatedly sighed at his daughter's beauty, and on the other hand, he was sad that he had forced his daughter to cover up her wolf parts for fear of being criticized by others. According to his own words, he was stupid and cowardly, causing Lorgar to suffer too much injustice, and also causing her to miss the most dazzling years as a divine lady. It could be said that he had not fulfilled his responsibilities as a father at all. Well, even if all these are true, it doesn't make sense for him to wear a cloth ear band and tie a piece of fur as a tail. You're the chief of the Wild Flame clan. Rohan screamed in his heart. If this image was spread to the port of Clearwater, how could he face the leaders of the other clans? This is my compensation to her. Don't say anything more, Gwell said seriously. Gwell said sternly, the fearless courage she displayed in the magic movie made me feel ashamed. She didn't care about what others thought of her and insisted on the path she had chosen. That's what I taught her, but I didn't manage to do it myself. If you want to settle disputes, instead of hiding your flaws, it's better to show them generously. If more people can accept this appearance, the wolf Lorgar won't be called a monster anymore. Rohan opened his mouth, but for a moment, he did not know how to persuade his father. I heard that you're questioning His Majesty's fairness. Suddenly, someone next to him said, foreigners, you know nothing about His Majesty's talent. His masterpiece can connect two places in an instant, and people who are hundreds of miles away can call each other face to face. Do you see what's hanging above our heads? Rohan looked in the direction of the man's finger and saw two huge cylinders hanging from a tree beside the road. They were black and swarthy, and Rohan could not associate them with telepathy. That's called a loudspeaker. It can amplify the sound dozens of times. When it's connected with a telephone, a magical device that can connect two places, it can ensure that we and the people in the Longsong area can hear His Majesty's password at the same time, the man said proudly. Oh. I see. Gwells clapped his hands and said, since it can ensure fairness, I have to take it seriously. But uncle, you're really strong. It's just winter and you're already wearing a short coat. Don't you feel cold? He looked at Gwells curiously and said, and this pair of pointy ears, it's over, it's coming. Rohan closed his eyes with difficulty. He knew that Gwells would definitely make fun of him, and there would only be two results: his father would endure it and they would lose face, or his father would fly into a rage and beat Gwells half to death, which would leave a bad impression on the great chief. "You're imitating the Ice Princess, aren't you? That's interesting." The man continued, "Can you tell me where you bought it?" "Ha!" Rohan could not believe his ears for a moment. "Ha ha ha, well." Just when Gwells was about to answer, the black cylinder, which was called a loudspeaker, suddenly made a shrill buzzing sound. "Hello, everyone, buzzing. I'm His Majesty Roland Wimbledon." The noisy crowd suddenly quieted down. "I think you're all familiar with the rules of the race, but I still want to reiterate here that the result is not the most important thing. This will be a challenge to yourself. As long as you do your best, you'll be a great winner no matter whether you run to the end or not. So don't put your mind on opportunistic tricks or obstructing others. Focus on your feet and rely on your own strength to win glory. I'll be waiting for you at the finish line, and I wish you all a good result. Then I announce." Chapter 1068. All of a sudden, the crowd burst into action. Amid the cheers of the onlookers, hundreds of people marched along Kingdom Avenue towards Longsong's stronghold like a surging tide. The police, who acted as referees and rescuers, also got on their bicycles and followed closely on both sides of the crowd. These unconventional knights in uniforms and bright ribbons attracted the attention of many spectators. The same scene also took place at the starting point of Longsong area. At the same time, more than 1,000 people, with the same purpose, strode towards the finish line, not to escape, nor to make a living, but to vent their energy without any scruples, regardless of the reward. This unconventional spectacle was destined to spread the name of Neverwinter to every corner of the continent. The curtains of the first organized long-distance running competition in the history of mankind began in this new capital. "Sister, why didn't you participate?" On the grandstand of the finishing line, Cole turned to look at Edith while Lance was leaning on the railing and yelling. "If it's just a competition of endurance, you should be able to get a place, right?" Perhaps it was because he had brought Lance over from his father's place. Lance had been in a good mood recently. Not only did he answer every question he had, but he also avoided the price of being teased. Otherwise, he would never dare to disturb his sister with such trivial questions. "Oh." Edith squinted at him and said, "So what if I got a place?" But weren't you very keen on this kind of competition before?" Cole thought, otherwise, she wouldn't have been called the Pearl of the Northern region. In his eyes, his sister used to be a person with too much energy. During the day, she would fight with a group of knights in full swing and defeat her peers single-handedly with a sword. The queue from Evernight Castle to the city gate could be formed. At night, she was the most dazzling flower in the banquet. She could drink with others and chat with them easily. Even Timothy could not forget her after seeing her once, which showed her charm. Because she could be seen in most of the competitions and banquets in the northern region, she had become a household name in the region. In the past, she would never have missed this kind of celebration hosted by His Majesty. "Because the family needed me to do that before." Edith shrugged. "If I don't expand the influence of the Kant family as soon as possible, my father won't be able to get the dukedom. Even if I have to act like a clown to attract the attention of those idiots and please them." She stopped and sneered. "You don't think I like doing that, do you?" Cole could not help but feel a chill on his face. "No, but now, I don't need to sweat in exchange for His Majesty's attention." Fortunately, His Majesty did not pursue the matter. "Anne. I'm not alone anymore." Cole was taken aback. "Not alone?" Edith glanced at Lance, who was making a fuss, then looked back at him. "I still have you guys, don't I?" The chill instantly dissipated, and Cole subconsciously puffed out his chest. He wanted to say something, but he didn't know what to say. Edith just smiled and turned her eyes back to the high platform. "Work hard in the administrative office. That's the biggest help you can give me." Huff, huff. Gwells slowed down. "How much more do we have to run?" The sign we passed just now is 14, which means we're only halfway there, Rohan said worriedly. Father, are you all right? If you're out of breath, we can stop and rest for a while. There are still so many people behind us. As the race progressed, the crowd was quickly stretched into the shape of an arrow, and then a long line. Now, even the line could not be seen. Obviously, it was not common to see people who could run for more than an hour without stopping. From the beginning until now, there were only a few contestants who could surpass them. At this pace, they should be able to finish the race smoothly, let alone get a good ranking. Rohan was more worried about his father's health. In fact, running was more laborious than crossing the desert. At least the former did not have a time limit. As long as they planned the route and ensured that they could get supplies from the oasis, they could eventually reach their destination step by step. However, running was different. To maintain a high speed, the consumption of physical strength would continue to increase, and his father had not done such strenuous exercise for a long time. You want to give up again? Gwels glared at him. Just because you're not the last one. If it were Lorgar, she wouldn't have said such words. When can you be like her, fighting with all your might for a goal and moving forward bravely? Have you never thought of beating everyone? In the past, Rohan would have chosen to remain silent. However, for some reason, he felt a sense of melancholy rising from the bottom of his heart, making his chest swell uncomfortably. How can I win? Should I poison my sister's cup? Or should I tell the public that she has turned into a wolf? Otherwise, how can I defeat a divine lady who has the power of 3 gods? I can't even defeat the head guard of the family. In order to stabilize the position of the number 1 clan in Iron Sand City, Wildflame must have sufficient combat strength. It was not surprising that Lorgar caught up and became the best heir in everyone's eyes. However, he chose to stay silent and avoid internal conflict. Wasn't that an action for the clan? Why didn't you notice me? Perhaps it was because this place was far away from the southern territory, or because he had been holding back for too long, or because his father's appearance was too strange, Rohan argued loudly for the first time. I'm worried about your condition. If you weren't here, I would have run to the front. However, as soon as he finished speaking, he regretted it. His words were simply mocking Rohan for dragging him down. He twitched his mouth and wanted to say something to salvage the situation before his father flew into a rage. However, Gwels replied, then you can run alone. Father, I mean. Rohan braced himself and turned his head. He expected to see his father's angry face, but he did not expect to see a smile at the corner of his mouth. This is the first time you've taken the initiative to reveal your thoughts, right? Gwels sighed. In fact, you're right. I'm really old. No matter how powerful I used to be, I can't change the influence of time. He paused. In that case, don't worry about me. You're actually good at long-distance running, aren't you? Rohan was startled. There's an old saying in the clan. If you practice anything for 10 years, even the stupidest person will become outstanding. Gwels slowly stopped. Don't worry about me. I'll slowly get there. He clenched his fists and remained silent for a moment before replying in a low voice, then I'll go first. Wait, Gwels stopped him just as he was about to turn around. Put these 2 things on. Father, even though Lorgar has left the clan, she's still a member of Wildflame and your biological sister. If there's anything we can do to help her, we should do our best. Gwels personally put the boar headdress on Rohan's head. Go. Show the great chief what the Sand Nation of the Majin clan is capable of. Rohan did not reply. He quietly looked at his father and then strode forward. The wind started to flow again. He ran faster and faster. At first, he could still hear the exclamations of the spectators, but in the end, they were completely drowned out by the wind. However, Rohan did not feel tired at all. He felt that he could run even faster. At this moment, his body seemed to be full of strength. It turned out that his father had been watching him. In order to ensure that his sister's status was undisputed, he had endured countless criticisms, from both outsiders and insiders. Whenever he could not bear it anymore, he would quietly leave Iron Sand City at night and run alone between the small oases. It was a way to vent his anger and also to prove himself in another way. He was indeed not good at martial arts, but he might be better than Lorgar in other aspects, such as joint hunting. Endurance and persistence were the most important factors in a joint hunt to drive away the prey. Even though this idea was not realized in the end. Rohan had thought that no one would notice his little attempt, but now it seemed that this was not the case. You're actually good at long-distance running, right? If you practice anything for 10 years, even the stupidest person will become outstanding. His father's words repeatedly lingered in his ears. Really? So you've noticed it from the beginning. Rohan quickened his pace a little more. From the day he ran in the oases until now. Chapter 1069. Look, that's the light of dawn, someone shouted from the side of the road. Where? Where? The one running in the first place. With the reminder of a sharp-eyed girl, a commotion broke out among the onlookers. It's really him. I thought I'd never see him again after I quit teaching. Wow, he's looking at me. Teacher Philin, come on. A tall, handsome man appeared at the end of the field of view. Although he looked a little tired, he still kept walking and firmly held the first place. What made everyone fall in love with him even more was that whenever someone cheered for him, he would try his best to smile back. When he met his former students, he would even wave at them. This amiable and gentle demeanor instantly captured the hearts of all his supporters. Honey, who was also in the same line of work, saw all of this. Philin Eltek, born in the Knight family, used to be an intermediate teacher in the Ministry of Education, and later transferred to the General Staff. He was known as the Light of Dawn. If he wins the championship, what should I write? Shocking. A man in Neverwinter makes thousands of women fall in love with him. What do you think? Are you asking me? Vader, who was pedaling his bicycle, panted. Isn't thousands a little too much? Facing this witch who looked and behaved like a little girl, he did not dare to look down on her. As a key figure in the publicity department, her immediate superior was the King of Greycastle, who had reached the peak of power at a young age. Moreover, it was said that she had a very close relationship with Her Excellency Vendi, the head of the Witch Union. If he treated such a witch like a little girl, he would definitely suffer in the end. Vader, who had been in the low-level patrol team for several years, naturally would not make such a low-level mistake. Therefore, when Honey came to him and asked for a ride to watch the whole competition from a close distance, he agreed without hesitation. Anyway, when Carter was not around, he would help with the police affairs, such as leading the team this time. It was no trouble at all for one more person. Of course, other than Honey's background, there was another reason why he was so enthusiastic. If the Security Bureau wanted to achieve results and nip all the hidden dangers that threatened the safety of His Majesty and the kingdom in the bud, they had to obtain as much detailed information as possible, which was exactly what the other party was good at. Therefore, no matter how he looked at it, it was necessary to befriend this witch. Don't worry too much about the details. Honey smacked her lips. If you saw this title for the first time, would you want to read it immediately? Yes, Vader replied honestly. That's good. The little girl whistled cheerfully. At this moment, a different voice sounded from the crowd. Don't you think that the man behind Teacher Philin is also very, not bad? A noblewoman covered her mouth and said. You noticed it too. I think he's much better looking than the Light of Dawn. Her words immediately caused a heated discussion among the people around her. I know him. The King's Chief Knight, Sir Carter Lannis. Look at the cloak on his back. There's the royal emblem on it. I see. No wonder he's the Chief Knight. But his expression is too cold. When he stares at us, it's like we owe him money. Alas, you're still too young. This kind of talent is more charming. Look, he's catching up. Come on, Sir Knight. Carter Lannis was also born in the Knight family. He used to belong to the Knight Regiment in King's City and later moved to border town with Prince Roland. He could be said to be one of the oldest founding heroes. He was agile and powerful. It was even said that he had the ability to compete with extraordinary witches. He was also Skrull's favorite candidate for the championship. Honey listened to the messages sent back by the birds while recording the game in her notebook. As Carter continued to accelerate, the distance between the two gradually shortened, and soon they were running side by side. The cheers had also turned from one-sided to mutual support. It seemed that the previous title had to be changed again. After thinking for a moment, Honey put down her pen in high spirits. Whose family will the flower fall? The love and hatred between two men. Carter felt as if his lungs were burning. In order to let May recognize him at first glance, he put on a bright ribbon and a cloak. However, at this moment, the originally incomparably light adornment was as heavy as a mountain. Especially when he was running against the wind, he even felt as if these things were pulling his body. But he still did not want to take off the ornaments. Because May had knitted it for him with her own hands. Carter hoped to wear them to cross the finish line, before the light of dawn. Although May had never mentioned it to him, he had heard some old stories from the members of the troupe. Before His Majesty moved to the western region, Philin had already been famous in Longsong. At that time, the light of dawn and the star of the western region were almost the envy of everyone. Everyone thought that they would be together, and his wife seemed to have fallen in love with Philin for a period of time. However, it turned out to be a misunderstanding. Philin always liked Irene, a newcomer in the theater. Although the matter was left unsettled in the end, Carter still had some resentment in his heart. So what if he was the light of dawn? She only liked him because a better version of himself had not appeared yet. He wanted to prove to those people that he was the most suitable person for May. And the first thing he had to do was to beat Philin Eltek, who was also a knight. Carter gathered his strength, stared at the opponent who was less than half a body's length away, and quickened his pace again. The viewing platform at the finish line gradually appeared in his field of vision. It was time to decide the winner. At this moment, he suddenly heard hurried footsteps behind him. Could someone catch up with him now? How was that possible? After all, an hour after the start of the competition, he and Ferlin had already left everyone else far behind. Even if they wanted to save their strength, they should not have waited until now to exert their strength. After all, sprinting consumed much more strength than running at a constant speed. Carter looked back in surprise. Wait. What was that? They saw a strangely dressed man of a different race rushing towards them, and the distance between them was shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. Judging from his skin color and tattoos, he should be a Majin Sand man, but what was up with the long ears on top of his head and the wagging tail behind him? Could it be that he had obtained strength by imitating a beast's ritual? This horrifying scene made Carter shiver all over. He felt as if he was being targeted by something terrible. He clenched his teeth and dashed toward the finish line. Amid the thunderous cheers of the audience, the three of them crossed the finish line almost at the same time. Did they win? Chief Knight panted and stopped after running for dozens of meters. He did not look at his opponent but looked straight at the top of the viewing platform. King Roland Wimbledon also stood up at this time. Congratulations! Not only did you successfully complete the race, but you also achieved an excellent result. His voice suddenly resounded over the Kingdom Avenue. Although the race is not over yet, the top three have been born in front of everyone. They are, Carter could not help but swallow his saliva. The third place is Carter Lannis. Hearing the result of the announcement, the Chief Knight closed his eyes unwillingly. Damn it, I'm still one step too late. The second place is Rohan Burnfire, a Majin Sand man. Roland paused for a moment. When the crowd quieted down, he continued loudly. The first one to reach the finish line is Sunflower from the Longsong area. Give them a warm round of applause. Ah. Who's that? Carter and the other two were stunned by the thunderous cheers of the audience. On the other side, Honey had closed her notebook and jumped off the back seat of the bicycle. Today's report is finally done. Thank you for your hard work. Have you decided on the title? Vader asked curiously. Yes, that's right. Honey smiled. Just write the result. That was enough to attract attention. Chapter 1070. Oh, that's wonderful, Barav exclaimed, stroking his beard. Even running can be so exciting. Indeed, when I saw the three of them running side by side, I felt my heart beat faster, Longsong Consul Perot echoed. Unfortunately, only one of them could get the commemorative badge. I have to say it's a pity. Is it really a pity? The old director smiled faintly. The one who won the medal is the contestant from Longsong. I'd rather do it a few more times than to be the center of attention. Don't say that. Miss Sunflower was just lucky. If there's no accident, you'll definitely get what you want in next year's Victory Day Games. Really? I'm worried about that accident. Ha ha ha, it's not an accident if it happens often. Well, they can even hide their sarcasm in discussing the result of the game. They really get along well, Roland thought as he glanced at Barav and Perot, who were chatting happily beside him. Although they were nearly 20 years apart in age, there was no generation gap between them at all. They were indeed experienced politicians who had been in the political circle for many years. Since the first few contestants had been decided, everyone felt much more relaxed. They whispered to each other about the game while waiting for the rest of the contestants to reach the finish line. There was no doubt that this kind of competitive event, which was in line with the psychology of human beings in pursuit of their own limits, had a natural affinity and charm. The atmosphere in the witches' seats was the same. Looking at the eager girls, Roland could not help but raise the corner of his mouth. The witches were not allowed to participate because the gap between them was too big. In order not to dampen the enthusiasm of the public, such a rule was made. Not only people with magic power, but also God's punishment witches of Tequila were also excluded. But now it seemed that holding a superpower field was only a matter of time. He wondered what it would be like when they used their ability in various sports. Is the games in that world also like this? Anna's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. You looked quite absent-minded in the first half of the game. Because there was no commentator or live broadcast, Roland sighed. You mean, you can let everyone know the progress and details of the competition at any time? Anna's eyes suddenly lit up. How do you do that? It's complicated to explain. He smiled. Do you remember the TV I mentioned? If it wasn't for the fact that he was used to watching the game in the future, this game could already be considered perfect. There were many responses, the players had a variety of styles, the process was brilliant, and the ending was unexpected. Carter, who was wearing a night cloak, and the Iron Zen nation of the Majin clan, who was cosplaying as the Wolf Girl, had stirred up a lot of discussion. According to the information from Scroll, Sunflower, the champion, was also quite dramatic. She used to be a black street rat, but after Longsong's stronghold was liberated, she became a glorious postman and ran through the streets and alleys of Longsong's stronghold all day long. It was this job that earned her the favor of the goddess of victory. Although there was a huge gap between Kuei and the other three in terms of strength, a champion was still a champion. Moreover, compared to the result, Roland cared more about the impact. Her aspiration undoubtedly made people think of the slogan, "Labor can change fate," which was exactly what Neverwinter needed. When the sky turned red, the first sports day basically came to an end. More and more residents gathered below the stage, forming a dense sea of people. Everyone was looking forward to the final awards ceremony in high spirits. For Roland, what came next was the highlight of the show. He stood up, nodded to Echo, and then walked to the railing of the stand. A crucial war needed an exciting start. If he wanted to use a pre-war speech to inspire people's confidence, there was no better time than now. He slowly glanced at the crowd until it was completely quiet. My people, you've just witnessed a miraculous challenge. In less than 4 hours, many people ran 28 kilometers on foot, which is exactly half of the total length of the kingdom main street. People from other territories may not understand its significance. In the past, it took at least 3 days to reach Longsong's stronghold from border town, and they had to travel day and night. At that time, if anyone said they could reach in 1 day with their own strength, they would only be regarded as a joke. But now, you've seen the answer with your own eyes. Whether it's building a road or running endlessly, it's the result of you surpassing yourself time and time again. I believe you've realized that the so-called impossible is just a shackle to be broken, and this competition is the best proof. Cheers suddenly sounded under the stage. Roland paused for a moment, stretched out his hand, and then said, "Now, we're facing a new challenge, which is the demons. In fact, the war has reached a critical moment. After today, the First Army will march to the fertile plains and launch a second attack on the demons in Tequila City. These demons are extremely cruel and insatiable. Their claws and teeth once turned the prosperous human kingdom into a bloody ruin. Tens of millions of innocent people died in their hands, and their bones could fill the entire Neverwinter. So, we have to fight, before disaster befalls everyone. We will fight them on the land, we will fight them on the sea, we will fight them in the air, until the devil is no more, and no enemy can threaten the living space of the human race. I'm very happy to see the San nation of the Majin clan among the contestants, as well as those from the fjords and other kingdoms. This means that we've put down our prejudices and estrangement and become closer to each other. And I dare say, this will also be the norm in the future. For the demons, human race, age, gender, and religion are all meaningless. The only thing they're interested in is killing everyone. So, this is not only a war for Greycastle, but also a war for the entire human race. My people, when you're afraid of the enemy, stop moving forward, or even want to retreat, think of today's miracle. As long as you hold on to your beliefs, we'll definitely win. Now, the top 10 contestants, please come to the stage and accept the honor you deserve. Roland said loudly. The crowd once again burst into deafening cheers. This time, the cheers did not stop for a long time and blended into one with the afterglow in the sky. As expected of the great chief. Gwells took a deep breath and said, "His words make me want to go into battle again." He looked at Rohan and said, "Are you ready to go?" "Father, but I..." Rohan bit his lip and looked sad. "You didn't win the championship?" Gwells laughed. He held his son's head and rubbed it hard. "But you tried your best, didn't you? That's enough. Go, stick out your chest, hold your head high, and let everyone see the glory of the heir of Wild Flame." Rohan trembled slightly. He looked at his father as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he just nodded. This time, he did not cover his specially made head ornament and tail. Chapter 1071. Oh my God, it's really you. When Sunflower walked down from the spectator stand with a heavy bag of gold royals in her hand, she heard a very familiar voice. She turned around and could not help but smile. "Hey, Tiger Claw. Ha ha ha, long time no see, Sunflower." Tiger Claw hugged her and patted her on the back. "When His Majesty announced your name, I thought it was someone with the same name. I didn't expect you to defeat the Chief Knight and the Light of Dawn. I'm so surprised. Wait, this feeling. Have you gained weight?" Sunflower pushed him away with a smile and punched him in the chest. "Go to hell. Compared to before, I only have skin and bones. This is normal, okay? No, I mean it's better to be a little fatter." Tiger Claw whistled. "At least you look more like a woman." He looked Sunflower up and down. "But seriously, your appearance has changed a lot. I wasn't sure when we were on the platform." "Really?" Sunflower shrugged. "My hair is a little longer and I eat a little more. Aren't you a lot stronger too? I trained on the construction site every day." Tiger Claw proudly raised his arms. Huff, huff. Sunflower, wait for me. Xiao struggled to get out of the crowd and gasped. Hey, isn't this Tiger Claw? Look, this guy hasn't changed at all. He's still so skinny. Tiger Claw also gave him a warm hug. Don't tell me you also ran all the way here. Ahem, ahem. Be gentle. Xiao smiled bitterly. I came here in the caravan owner's carriage. If it weren't for Sister Kuei insisting that I accompany her, I wouldn't even want to make this trip. You're a merchant now. Just a handyman. He scratched the back of his head embarrassedly. Doesn't this guy know how to read a few words? Sunflower curled her lips. He learns elementary education faster than the others. After passing the examination, he was chosen by a chamber of commerce. He sits in his room and deals with the account book every day. Life is so comfortable. I see. Fortunately, you came. Otherwise, how could we coincidentally meet? Tiger Claw guffawed. Let's go to Neverwinter and have a good drink to celebrate Sunflower. Yes, but... Dawn looked around. Where's Snaketooth? Didn't he sign up for the competition? Sunflower's heart skipped a beat. In fact, she had wanted to ask this question for a long time, but she did not want to appear too eager, so she pretended to be nonchalant and looked at Tiger Claw. Could it be that he was left behind by you and went back by himself? He ran to the concealing forest alone to build the railway. Tiger Claw replied lazily. Although the pay is good, you might lose your life if you're not careful. What's the point of earning more? In the past, he even lived in the sewers. Now that he has a proper house, he's still not satisfied and wants to pursue a double room. Sometimes, I really don't understand what he's thinking. That was because it could provide a warm and comfortable home for the family, not just a shelter from the elements. Sunflower thought sourly, of course it's for paper. Paper? Tiger Claw was confused. Hey, don't tell me you've forgotten about paper. Dawn poked him. She's our companion. I know, but what does it have to do with her? Tiger Claw was confused. Paper has joined the Witch Union and lives in the castle district. She doesn't need us to provide her with a house. Besides, Snaketooth has seen Paper several times, but he didn't dare to greet her. He even pulled me to the side to hide. As a result, she still doesn't know we're here. What? Sunflower was stunned. You haven't seen Paper in more than 2 years. Tiger Claw shook his head helplessly. Pfft, ha ha ha. Sunflower grinned. Then he's really a fool. Somehow, she suddenly felt a lot more relaxed and even her steps became lighter. Sister Sunflower, lower your voice, Dawn said hurriedly. Everyone around us is looking at us. Sunflower did not care at all. Instead, she waved at the crowd and received a burst of friendly laughter. People had undoubtedly regarded her as a Miss Champion. It's so good to be famous. Tiger Claw sighed. 2 years ago, I never thought I'd have such a day. Compared with fame, the 100 golden dragons are more important. Dawn had a different opinion. If you use them to do business, you'll definitely earn more than work. Even if you don't know anything about it, you can find a chamber of commerce to invest in it. If you can make it big, you'll basically earn money without doing anything. No, I want to buy a house, Sunflower interrupted. In the border district. Huh? Dawn was stunned. But this is obviously a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If you start from scratch, do you know how long it'll take to save 100 golden dragons? I know, but I've decided, Sunflower said without hesitation. Then what about your job? That's why I'm going to buy a bicycle, she said. You've seen how easy it is to ride. If I have a bicycle, I should be able to get back to the Longsong district in a day, no, in a morning. And there are a lot of letters that are delivered from both sides. Maybe I can make more money. You. Dawn looked at her for a long time and finally sighed as if surrendering. Whatever. I've never persuaded you anyway. Sunflower smiled, but her mind flew back to 2 years ago. The day of their separation. When the four of them stood on the dock, she had asked Snaketooth, "Will you come back?" But she never got an answer. At that time, she felt that she might never see him again. Border Town and Longsong's stronghold were so far away that even if they merged into one city, they were still worlds apart in Sunflower's eyes. After all, the farthest place they had been to was the garbage dump outside Longsong City. In her mind, Border City was an unreachable place. It was not until she was tempted by the reward of the sports meet that Sunflower set foot on the Kingdom Main Street for the first time. In order to cheer herself up, she forced Dawn to come with her. Unexpectedly, the distance between the two places was beyond her imagination. Compared with winning the first place, Sunflower was more surprised to find that the distance between her and Snaketooth was not that far. There were no winding mountain roads or bumpy roads. A straight black stone road connected the two places. For the first time, she felt like she was in a city. In that case, why should she wait for him to come back? She just needed to go there by herself. Just like what His Majesty said. The so-called impossible might really be a shackle to be broken. Before trying, who knows if it will be another miracle? Let's go to a tavern. I'll buy you a drink. Sunflower patted her purse. Oh. Tigerclaw clenched his fist excitedly. It's a pity that Snaketooth won't be able to enjoy it. Remember to save the money at the hotel first, Dawn reminded. Just bring 4 or 5 golden dragon coins. I know, Sunflower smiled. She did not know what the final result would be, but she wanted to try. Chapter 1072. The next morning after the sports meeting, when Roland walked into the reception hall, all the officials who had been waiting for him stood up in unison. Sit down. He walked to the main seat, looked around, and said in a loud voice, I think you already know why I called you here. The war has begun. This is not just about the army. From this moment on, I demand that the managers of every institution and every department in the kingdom have a basic understanding of the situation and the trend of the war, and that they should play their role actively to deal with the expedition together. He said word by word, since the establishment of Neverwinter, everyone has made impressive achievements. But in the face of the crisis of the divine will, all these achievements are like a pavilion on a floating ice. If we don't conquer the Tequila ruins, the red mist may swallow the whole continent at any time, and then the demons won't be able to stop us. So, this war can only be won, not lost. Yes, Your Majesty. Barav and the others said in unison. Very good. Roland looked at Edith and said, Next, the General Staff will explain the specific strategic direction. Yes, Your Majesty. The Pearl of the Northern Region stood up and said elegantly with her hand on her chest, Please allow me to explain using the big map. She walked to Roland's side and knocked on the map of the Western Region on the wall. After many revisions and additions, the map almost included half of the barbarian no man's land, and Neverwinter, which was originally the center of the map, was now a small dot on the edge. Anyone who glanced at it would realize how small the human settlement was, which was one of Roland's original intentions. He hoped that his ministers and officials would be able to set their sights further, and not be obsessed with the little benefits they had now. First of all, we have to make sure that this northern expedition is different from what we've experienced in the past. It will last for a long time, Edith said directly. Edith went straight to the point. I hope everyone understands that we can't end this battle quickly. The tactic of concealment used in the Battle of the North Slope was impossible to be used again. The distance between the Misty Forest and the Tequila ruins was far greater than the distance between the destroyed outpost and the Misty Forest. It would take at least a month to build the railway, so it was impossible for the demons to not notice it. On the vast fertile plains, the enemy had the absolute advantage of mobility. Therefore, Roland had given up the illusion of a surprise attack from the very beginning. He planned to invest his superior forces and fight the demons head-on. Without a doubt, this would be a battle between spear and shield. Everyone already knew about this plan, so no one was surprised. Barav was the only one who asked, "Then do you have an estimated time?" "It depends on the strength of the demon's counterattack." The general staff asked the Tequila Witches to run many simulations. "Assuming that the scale of the enemy's attack is similar to that of the Battle of the North Slope, we'll be able to put the Longsong cannons on their faces in 3 months if they come once a week. But they are not fools. It is impossible for them to repeat the same mistakes again and again." "That's right. I think the demons will soon notice the use of the railway and even the misty forest behind us. Of course, we're not unprepared. Because the war is full of variables, I hope the administrative office can prepare for the worst and allocate resources." "The worst is?" Barav frowned. "From spring to winter, until the new months of demons," Edith answered frankly. "Doesn't that mean we've failed?" The old director grinned. "That doesn't meet His Majesty's requirements. As long as they don't withdraw, the war will not end. It will be a stalemate at most." The Pearl of the Northern Region smiled. "We can continue the war when the snow melts the next year." Seeing the hesitation on the faces of the ministers of the administrative office, she added, "But it's unlikely that this will happen. After all, the demons can't reproduce as fast as they can produce bullets. I just want to be prepared." Barav thought for a moment and said, "In this case, I need to transfer food from other territories as reserves. The golden twos have been distributed to all parts of the kingdom. If everything goes well, there should be a lot of harvest this year. If we collect all of them, we can basically meet the needs of the First Army for a year." "No problem," Sirius Daly, the Minister of Agriculture, said. "I'll write letters to the City Hall later." "We also need to adjust the work of the Ministry of Chemical Industry," Barav continued. "We need to produce as much gunpowder and explosives as possible. We only have so many people, unless we reduce the production of perfume and soap." Kyle Sichi, the Minister of Chemical Industry, spread out his hands. "Maybe we can rent a group of alchemy apprentices from neighboring countries to support Greycastle." He looked at Roland. "I heard that the King of Dawn also has several alchemy workshops. Although they are not in the City of Glow, if His Majesty asks, the King of Dawn will do his best to cooperate and won't care about the return date. In addition, the First Army has more than 100 people stationed in the Cage Mountain area. We can also consider alchemists from the Kingdom of Wolfheart and the Kingdom of Everwinter." "In principle, no problem." Roland nodded with satisfaction. "Come up with a plan according to your idea." Roland was very pleased with Edith's performance. At the beginning of the unification of the kingdom, he had thought that the new political system might need 2 to 3 years of running in before it could play its proper role. After all, changing their mindset was a rather difficult thing to do. Over the past few decades, these people had already gotten used to the mundane rule that all matters of the territory belonged to the suzerains, and that the suzerains did not interfere with each other. Suddenly asking them to open up their sights and view other territories as part of their control was too much for them to bear. However, he found that he had underestimated the charm of power. When the power in one's hands suddenly increased several times, even if they did not realize the nature of the change, they would try to use it. Barav was one of the most outstanding ones. He not only saw the Kingdom of Dawn, but also the possibility of using the army to exert influence and seize resources from further places. After the discussion, Edith continued, "But it's not enough to directly destroy the demon's encampment. For some reason, we have to eliminate all the enemies as soon as possible. This requires us to cut off the demon's retreat, including the sky and the ground, before the final attack, which only the witches can do." "For some reason?" Barav was puzzled. "Will taking a detour increase the risk for them?" "Because of the curse." Roland took over the topic. "There's a senior demon among the enemies who can cast a magic curse from a distance. The mechanism of its action is not clear, but it's likely to be similar to the Church Witch Black Veil. If we let it escape, even if the First Army wins, it will be a Pyrrhic victory." There was a sudden gasp in the hall. The first army lost more than 700 people just by eye contact, which was the largest casualty since the establishment of the army. That battle made everyone remember the name Black Veil. If the demons could also cast a curse through eye contact, then killing them first would be a natural choice. Roland glanced at Lightning, who had buried her head in her chest at the end of the long table, and could not help but sigh. He could completely guess her feelings. She would probably feel extremely guilty for letting her sisters take such a risk for her, even if they had no complaints. But now, there was no better choice. Roland stood up from the main seat. In short, the goal of this expedition is to completely eliminate the threat of the obelisk before the Battle of Divine Will, and at the same time, weaken the demon's war potential. The operation is codenamed Torch. It is not only the light of hope to destroy the enemies, but also the original fire of departure that illuminates the entire fertile plains. Please do your best to open up new territory for Greycastle. Everyone stood up and bowed with their hands on their chests. Chapter 1073. In the flight training field of Neverwinter. Hurry up. Walk faster. Keep your balance. Your legs are even weaker than a baby's. Direction. Watch your direction. Hey, where are you going? I really should put a row of braziers on both sides of the aisle. If you want to vomit, go to the side. Don't vomit on the wooden board, or you'll lick it clean. Next, good. Yes. Good shivered. He took a deep breath, walked to a swivel chair and sat down. Instructor Eagleface's cold face was also reflected in his eyes. Good shuddered even if he just looked at Eagleface. He heard that Eagleface used to be the commander of the garrison in the northern region. After returning to Neverwinter, he immediately participated in the internal military examination and became a member of the Air Knight Reserve team. This meant that he had not only experienced the Battle of the Church, but also gave up his vacation to devote himself to new training. In other words, he was the kind of person who was cruel to others and to himself. Good only felt great pressure when he was targeted by such a person. As soon as he sat down, his two teammates, Finkin and Heinz, surrounded him. On their faces, Good saw that they were praying for their own good luck. Then the chair was quickly rotated. This was the most troublesome training since he joined the reserve team. In front of the swivel chair was a 5-meter-long, palm-wide wooden board, called the overpass. They had to be rotated for half a minute before they had to walk across the board. This was usually easy for anyone to do, but it was completely different after the rotation. Their body seemed to lose its center of gravity, and the world was shaking. It was not easy to maintain a standing posture, let alone walk on the overpass. Usually, Eagleface would divide the training into 10 groups, and the one with the worst performance would be punished with cleaning the toilet, cutting out the weeds, etc., or he would be forced to rotate for a whole day during the weekend. Good had tried it once. As a result, he vomited all over the floor in his dormitory while the others were enjoying their dinner. He did not want to experience such a terrible experience again. Stop! As Eagleface gave the order, the rotating chair was suddenly stopped. Good resisted the dizziness that rushed to his head and jumped off the chair. Quick! Don't just stand there, move! He clenched his teeth, raised his eyes, staggered on the wooden board, and walked to the other end. After more than 10 days of practice, he discovered a small trick, which was that staring at his feet made it easier for him to lose his balance. It was better to look straight ahead and use his body's memory to control his steps. When the soles of his feet touched something solid, Good realized that he had already walked to the end of the bridge. So powerful, he didn't miss a single step. This is the first time, right? A commotion broke out behind him. He turned around and looked at Eagleface. The latter curled his lips into a rare smile. Not bad. Looks like you're not hopeless. However. The instructor paused and his tone changed. Only one person has passed today. This is the worst result among all the classes. Her Highness Tilly has said that the aerial knight is 1 in a million. If you don't want to be eliminated by the entire team and end up doing miscellaneous things on the ground forever, then you better pull yourself together and practice harder. Rest for 5 minutes, then come again. Everyone immediately let out a cry of anguish. Hey, how did you do it? Finkin came up to Good and asked, winking at him. Remember the distance of your steps and pretend that you're not dizzy. Just walk as you normally do. Can you even pretend? Heinz also came up to him. Isn't that equivalent to lying to yourself? The two of them were the same batch of applicants who had passed the assessment with Good. Therefore, they had become familiar with each other in just a few days. Moreover, the air cavalry had grouped them together according to the rule of 3, and they were now almost inseparable comrades. It doesn't matter if it's a lie or not, as long as you can pass. Good knocked his head. Generally speaking, the smarter a person is, the harder it is to lie to himself. You should be able to do it easily. Come on, Finkin said indignantly. You've only succeeded once. Look at how proud you are. Let's make a bet. In the next group, I can succeed 5 times. Then I'll take care of your laundry this week. Even underwear counts? Stop arguing, Heinz interrupted. What I want to know is, can you really become an air knight by practicing on the ground? The two of them were speechless. This was a question that all the trainees were wondering about. Walking on a bridge, rolling wheels, and identifying the direction of the wind. It was more like a sideshow than training soldiers. Her Royal Highness did not teach them personally. Instead, she taught the skills to the backbone of the First Army and let them lead the classes. In addition, the training was very tough. Not only did they practice from morning to night, but they also had to attend intensive classes at night to learn how to read and write. If not for Her Royal Highness Tilly's promise, most of them would probably doubt the authenticity of the announcement. However, the instructor was so strict that no one dared to bring it up. Who knows? After a while, Finkin shrugged. At least the food here is good. We can eat meat every day and have extra meals on weekends. I don't think Her Royal Highness would lie to us, Good said thoughtfully. Good said thoughtfully, didn't we get a bag of books the other day? My sister told me that there was a book called Flight Principles. It was written by Her Royal Highness. Maybe we'll know the meaning of these exercises when we master how to read and write. You're quite optimistic, Finkin said with a grin. If I didn't look on the bright side, I would have died on the road to exile. Well, it's time for a break. At this moment, Eagle Face's voice instantly drowned out everyone's whispers. Line up and practice in the same order as before. Yes. Everyone said weakly. However, an accident happened. The door of the training room was suddenly pushed open. A man in a military uniform walked in and whispered something in Eagle Face's ear. Eagle Face nodded, saluted, and then turned to look at the trainees. Congratulations, the follow-up training is cancelled. You can continue to rest. Finkin and Heinz breathed a sigh of relief, but Good held his breath. He clearly saw an ambiguous smile on Eagle Face. There was sarcasm, ridicule, and schadenfreude in it. But not here, Eagle Face said. Don't think that I don't know what you're complaining about in private. Unfortunately, with your poor brains, you won't understand even if I explain it to you. But you're in luck. Now there's a chance for you to witness the true meaning of the term empty night. The true meaning of empty night? Good suddenly felt his heart beating faster. Chapter 1074. They left the training room and headed south along the cement road. There were brand new red brick houses everywhere on the road. Some had just been built, and some were still under construction. According to Finkin, a year ago, this place was just a wasteland near the sea with nothing but a few lonely tree trunks. But now, the construction team had turned this place into a city within a city. It was surrounded by walls. Although not high, they were high enough to separate this place from the outside world. The warning signs painted on the walls read, "No climbing over, violators will be shot," which discouraged those who wanted to sneak in and out. Inside the walls, there were dormitories, canteens, sports fields, training rooms, classrooms, and so on, and there were more than one. It took Good a day to figure out the meaning of these strange words. In short, they could eat, dress, live, and study inside the walls. This was probably what the instructor meant by closed management. Last but not least, this place was extremely large. He had been here for several weeks, but he had not seen the corner of the walls. Of course, this also had to do with the limited range of activities for students. Without special permission, they could only travel between the dormitory and the sports field. All of this had happened in the span of a year. Good, who had just moved to the western region in the winter, had never felt it directly, although he had often heard people mention that Neverwinter was famous for its amazing construction speed. It was not until he entered this city within a city that he understood what it meant to be fast. The southern end of the sports field, which had been empty a week ago, was now filled with red bungalows. In other cities, this efficiency could be described as unimaginable. After passing through the wall of the sports field, the team began to talk. This was a place that they were forbidden to enter. Today, they could finally see the whole picture of this place. It was an extremely open and flat land. There was no obstruction as far as their eyes could see. The blue sky and clouds occupied most of their vision, and a little further was the boundless swirling sea. The slightly chilly sea breeze blew against Good's face, making him feel refreshed. He had to admit that when he was used to seeing the red brick houses in front of him, he suddenly felt that the whole world had expanded when he saw this scene. Strange. "I thought there would be something extraordinary here," Heinz murmured. "Isn't it just an empty space?" Yes, it was an open space. Apart from a few blackstone roads that were wider than the main streets of Neverwinter, there were no other conspicuous buildings. The fact that it was designated as a restricted area was really confusing. Maybe they're worried that the scenery here is too beautiful, and they're afraid that we'll lose our footing and fall into the sea. Finkin grinned. "But I think that if the classroom is moved here, I'll be at least 30% more enthusiastic about studying." "Are you saying that 0 times 3 is still 0? Someone beside him mocked. "Hey, are you challenging me?" Finkin glared at him. "How about we compare our scores? Let's not talk about this. Look over there." Good raised his eyebrows. "Someone has already arrived. It's another class." Heinz's words made the whole team quiet down. Although they had never had direct contact with him, they had heard from their instructors how excellent he was. He had said that he completed all the exercises in one day, asked for extra training at night, vomited but still could not get off the swivel chair. In short, he was determined and hard-working, while they were like a bunch of fools who had wasted their talent and were inferior to him in everything. This made them subconsciously regard him as an enemy. "Raise your heads. Don't look away. You'll lose if you do." Everyone cheered him on. The expressions of those people weren't any better. Seeing them coming, the students who had arrived first stared at them coldly with a straight face. They did not have the self-awareness of being excellent students at all. The tense confrontation did not end until the two teams separated. "All right, let's just wait here." Eagle Face led everyone to the Blackstone Road and stopped. "But remember, no matter what you see, don't leave your position. His Majesty the King and Princess Tilly will both be present. Any reckless actions will be seen as dangerous. You should be very clear about the consequences." "Will the King also come?" "No, he should be here already." Good noticed that the shed on one side of the open space was surrounded by soldiers and policemen of the First Army. Apparently, only the King of Greycastle could command the two departments to come out and protect him. It seems that the aerial night is really extraordinary. Good could not help but look forward to the next development. As for Eagle Face's last meaningful sneer, he forgot about it for a moment. Inside the hangar, it was a different scene. The first large glider, the Seagull, had completed all the preparations and was ready to set off. This was also the first manned glider that Tilly had officially built after she mastered all the operating procedures of the experimental glider. Compared to the simple frame and thin wings exposed during the test flight, it not only had a larger body and wider wings, but it also wrapped the frame with a skin and added auxiliary equipment such as portholes, seats, and a rear-opening airtight door that was easy to ride on. All in all, the Seagull finally looked like a complete plane. Most of the gliders that had appeared in history were used to supplement the shortage of transport aircraft. Basically, it was common to save as much as possible, so the wooden frame and canvas skin were common. After all, a hole in the frame would not affect the flight. Compared with its crude predecessors, the Seagull was built on the other extreme. Aluminum alloy and high-strength steel were only the foundation. Every large part could be cut in one piece without bolts or welding. Non-structural components were densely covered with small holes to reduce the weight as much as possible. The magic coating could ensure that air would not leak when there was a large air pressure difference between the inside and the outside. The bottom of the belly was also equipped with landing armor. As long as it did not lose its balance and roll over, even if it crashed, it would be safe. After all, it was carrying witches. As the only model that would be produced, safety was not an exaggeration. Then, "I'm boarding." Anna gently kissed Roland's cheek. "See you tomorrow. Be careful. Don't force yourself," Roland said seriously. "If you encounter demons, remember to protect yourself first." She smiled and said, "I know. You've said it dozens of times. Please rest assured. I'll protect her." Phyllis, the god's punishment witch, said solemnly. After a while, Roland let go of Anna's hand and nodded slowly. "Go. I'll wait here for you." After the railway was built to the turning point, the First Army first opened up a piece of flat land on the edge of the forest as an airport. The distance of more than 500 kilometers made it impossible for any means of transportation other than Maggie to arrive in one day. Therefore, the importance of the glider was highlighted. Chapter 1075. After everyone boarded the plane, Tilly walked up to Roland and asked, "What's wrong? Are you still worried? You can tell. It's only been a day, but everything you've said sounds like a farewell." "It would be strange if I couldn't tell." Tilly shrugged and said, "Are you doubting my skills or Anna's ability?" Faced with this dilemma, Roland could only smile bitterly for a moment. The structure of Seagull was extremely simple. Apart from a few operating rods and corresponding steering surfaces, it was basically a container for people. It was not much more complicated than the prototype. With Anna's processing skills, it was difficult to even think of a problem. After it was built, it had also conducted a few test flights and simulated an emergency landing. The results were very satisfactory, not to mention Tilly's extremely strong control skills. Vendi had also made great progress in the run-in. She could always find the right airflow to keep the plane stable at all times. And for the safety of this long-distance flight, Xavi and Molly were also brought along. It could be said that it was foolproof. But even so, he still felt nervous. Half of the elite witches in Neverwinter were gathered on a brand new aircraft and were going alone to the hinterland of the barbarian land 500 kilometers away. This was enough reason for him to worry. If not for the fact that he still had a lot of work to do in Neverwinter, he even wanted to take Seagull with them. After exhaling softly, he looked at Tilly and said, "I think it has nothing to do with suspicion. It's just that you care too much. I hope that all of you can live safely to the new era after the end of the divine will." After the two of them looked at each other for a moment, Tilly turned her head away and said, "I know, I'm just joking. If it were me, I would also feel uneasy." Before Roland could react, she had already turned around and stepped onto the gangway. "Then I'm off, brother." After the cabin door closed, a guard walked over and said, "Your Majesty, everything is ready outside." Roland took a deep breath and replied in a low voice, "Let's begin." "Yes." As the command was given, the procedures began to run in an orderly manner. The limiter has been activated. The road is cleared. All personnel leave the runway. Open the door. When the door of the hangar slowly slid open to both sides, the dazzling sunlight shone into the room, projecting a path of light on the ground. The guide raised the green flag. Seagull, ready to take off. At the same time, the siren resounded throughout the airport. Roland felt the wind rising. It was a wonderful feeling. He was standing in a position where there should be absolutely no wind, but he could still feel the gentle breeze brushing his cheeks. It was unfair to compare the Seagull to its peers as a pure glider. What the latter had been trying so hard to obtain, the Seagull had from the very beginning. The airflow defied common sense and appeared precisely behind the wing surface. The breeze pushed the raised ailerons like an invisible hand. This kind of power seemed insignificant, but Roland knew that it was the result of Vendi's deliberate control. The remaining wind that dissipated was gentle, but within the range of a few fingers from the wing surface, it was a strong wind that could make it difficult for people to move even an inch. In other words, within the area affected by Vendi's ability, the direction and speed of the wind were all controlled by her. This also meant that the Seagull did not need to rely on its wings to maintain flight. It could also perform actions that would leave other gliders dumbfounded. For example, it seemed to be a short vertical takeoff and landing. Speed was only in exchange for greater lift. If it could directly obtain lift, speed would naturally not be an indispensable factor. Of course, such a light flight might be a shocking feat in the eyes of an expert, but in the eyes of a layman, it was obviously lacking. What could be more shocking than a huge thing that weighed several tons whizzing past one's head and then slowly climbing up until it disappeared into the clouds? Thinking of Tilly's expression when she excitedly proposed this idea, Roland could not help but shake his head in amusement. It seemed that she had completely treated the Seagull as her big toy and could not wait to show it off to others. Woo, woo, as the steam whistle sounded, Good also noticed the strange scene at the end of the Blackstone Road. The soldiers dispersed, and the iron door of the shed opened. A strange-looking gray, giant bird slowly glided out, turned a small half-circle, and drove onto the road where they were. Hey, look, what's that? Clearly, he was not the only one who had discovered the giant creature. A train? It doesn't look like it. There are no tracks on the ground. It's probably a new machine invented by Her Majesty. Could it be the one that Sir Eagleface was talking about? It seems to be coming towards us. Wait, he seemed to have seen this thing somewhere before. Good pondered for a while, and suddenly a thought flashed through his mind. Wasn't there a similar cover image in the books that Princess Tilly had given him? It looked like a bird, but it was not. The slender and symmetrical wings indeed looked somewhat similar to the Seagull. But after thinking for a while, he felt that the two did not match at all. Not to mention the difference in appearance and the number of wings. From the cover, he could at least see the pilot, and he could roughly understand why the thing in the picture seemed to be floating in the air. After all, a skeleton not much bigger than a human supporting a pair of huge wings, in a sense, it was like a magnified kite. Although he knew that the thing that the king and princess valued would not be so simple, it was still reasonable to think it through. But the thing in front of him was completely the type that could not be understood. Comparing it to the surrounding soldiers, it could be seen that it was far larger than the former. Other than its wings, its entire body was round, and its whole body was wrapped tightly. Its slender belly seemed to be able to stuff a lot of things. According to this size, not to mention flying, it should even be difficult to crawl on the ground, but the next moment, Good realized how ridiculous his thoughts were. The other party began to accelerate. And it soon surpassed the speed of a horse, and it did not seem to have the slightest intention of stopping. The team, which had been discussing fervently at first, unknowingly quieted down. Everyone could hear the rumbling sound coming from afar. My God! Finkin swallowed. It's going to hit us. This was also the common feeling of most of the preparatory trainees. Logically speaking, as long as they stood still, the two would not really hit each other. But even so, their bodies seemed to be trembling uncontrollably. Not everyone could remain calm in the face of a giant beast that could trample them into meat paste with one foot. And this was such a giant beast, they were not even as tall as the other party's wheels. As it got closer, the whistling sound of the wind was almost like a roar, and there was a slight tremor on the ground. It was said that when the knight charged, the sound of the horse's hooves alone could make the enemy collapse. But compared to the monster that was pressing down on him like a mountain, Good found that the knight was nothing. He suddenly remembered the indecipherable sneer of Eagle Face. Instructor. Had he already experienced it? Before he could think about it, a gust of wind swept past. In a short period of time, it had covered a distance of hundreds of meters, running straight through the crowd on both sides. Under the impact of the airflow, Good finally could not control his feet. His knees gave way and he fell to the ground, perhaps he had subconsciously dodged before the gust arrived. He did not bother to get up, but turned his head to look behind him. And the next scene made him even more dumbfounded. He saw the giant beast raise its head, its feet left the ground, and suddenly soar into the sky, flying toward the blue sky. The sun shone on its wings, forming a colorful circle of dazzling light spots. Is this the aerial knight? Good could not help but clench his fists. Chapter 1076. Roland did not look away until the seagull had completely disappeared into the sky. Sometimes I think it's better to build a frontline headquarters, he whispered. Staying in a place where everyone can see it can boost morale and also be considered to have personally participated in the battle of divine will. In the future, when historians record it, it'll be a little more to brag about. Do you still care about that? A reply came from the void. Besides, before being recorded in history, you have to endure Vendy and Scroll's incessant chatter until you admit your mistake and change your mind. I've experienced it before, and it's definitely not something an ordinary person can endure. It's better not to give them more trouble. Roland could not help but laugh. That's true. The battle with the demons was likely to last for months or even years. He had to work hard to adapt to this new normal. Thinking of this, he looked at the guards in the distance. Summon everyone. I'm going to the third border city. The latter immediately saluted and said, Yes, Your Majesty. I'll inform the guards right away. According to Kyle Sichi's report, there was new progress in the research of the rubber worms. It was time to test the results. Let's go. He nodded to his side and then walked toward the exit of the airport. After confirming that the secretions of the rubber worms had important uses, the tequila witches not only opened up a series of new caves for them, but also took on the role of keepers in their spare time. After all, it was not easy to find ordinary people who could face the devouring worms calmly and talk cheerfully in the worm caves. In addition, long-term work in the underground could easily lead to psychological instability. The breeding part was now completely taken over by the tequila witches, and the workers were only responsible for the loading and processing of the rubber. It could be said that this was another miscalculation by Roland. He underestimated the tolerance of people in a claustrophobic environment. The rubber worms hated sunlight, liked humidity, and would move according to sound. Even if they were not aggressive, the rustling sound from time to time was enough to weaken people's spirit. He was also unable to provide lighting and communication equipment for every worker, formulate detailed shift rules, and come up with a set of psychological comfort guidance. It was not that it was impossible, but that the cost-performance ratio was too low. There were a lot of factories outside that needed manpower, and he could just pull them in and use them. There was no need to waste time on bewitching them. Therefore, he simply transferred the ordinary people to the more relaxed follow-up process. Prius Dessau, the knight of chickens and ducks, did not stay idle either. He used his free time to write breeding manuals and guide the production of chickens. He also played a significant role in the rapid growth of related products in Neverwinter. The expanded breeding scale provided more samples for the glue test. It was because of this basic research that Roland had the conditions for the Minister of Chemical Industry to intervene and carry out the next step of the plan. After entering the underground, Pasha came forward and said, "Welcome, Your Majesty. Your people are now in the rubber worm lab. Do you need me to inform them?" "No, you can take me there," Roland said with a smile. "By the way, I heard that Celine has built a new farm, which is bigger than the previous ones combined." "Yes, it's opposite the lab." Pasha nodded her main tentacle. "It not only uses the latest research results of the Quest Society, but also uses ideas from the dream world. Do you want to visit it?" "Oh." He suddenly became interested. "Of course. Then please come with me." After passing through a long passage, Pasha took Roland to a large cave. The entrance of the cave was equipped with iron bars, apparently to prevent the insects from escaping. Entering the cave from a small door on the side, he could not help but be slightly stunned. The environment in the cave was completely designed according to the snow mountain ruins, with luminous plants, water plants, and giant mushrooms. However, the three had obviously been adjusted reasonably. The plants were arranged along the edge of the stone wall and the flowing water, just like new street lights. As the main food of the insects, mushrooms were obviously the most abundant species. The huge mushroom umbrellas almost covered the ground tightly. Countless insects swarmed inside, and under the dim fluorescent light, only groups of white wriggling bodies could be seen. They happily gnawed on the mushrooms, and the dense crunching sound reminded Roland of the silkworms he raised when he was a child. But what surprised him more was the size of the cave. Judging from the endless luminous plants, it was probably even bigger than the main hall of the third border city. He had thought that the new farm was just a combination of several old caves, but now it seemed that it was not the case. The orderly blue light spots and the straight water system made him feel a little like a large factory. This is just the edge of the impassable mountain range, and the height of the surface of Neverwinter is the same, Pasha took the initiative to introduce. If we open the cave from the south, it is only a kilometer away from the kingdom main street. Didn't this mean that the new farm was only separated from Neverwinter by a wall? If he remembered correctly, he estimated the distance they had moved just now to be no more than 2 kilometers away from the main city, and the outside of the stone wall should be the temporary residential area for the immigrants. To facilitate the transportation of mucus? Roland asked thoughtfully. Exactly. Pasha raised her main tentacle. "Your Majesty, please look at the south end." He looked in the direction Pasha was pointing and saw a deep horizontal ditch under the wall, as if it was specially left for the rubber worms to escape. "What's that?" "Material retrieving area." Pasha explained. Celine made use of the insect's ability to attract sound to cut a narrower and narrower passage in the wall. As long as a specific chirp was made at the other end, they would drill into the passage and move toward the source of the sound. But limited by the width of the passage, they could only poke out half of their heads at most, and their bodies would be stuck in the passage. And then? Nightingale, who had been listening on the side, could not help but ask. "Next, we'll activate the magic core at the end of the passage," Pasha continued. "It has been adjusted to the sharp blade mode. The cyclone is generally used to defend against enemies in narrow passages. The core will emit a beam of magic light, which will fill the entire passage and tear up any obstacles in front of it. The horizontal passage is the path that the magic light will pass through. The worms will be divided into two, and the mucus in their bellies will gather along the drainage groove in the horizontal ditch. In this way, we don't need to kill them one by one, and we can get a lot of mucus at once." She paused for a moment. "The reason why we reserved a distance of 1 kilometer is for the gatherers. According to Celine's idea, ordinary workers could enter the material retrieving area from the outside of the mountain, but they would not see anything except the ditch and the pool with the mucus flowing. This way, it would be convenient to collect, and it would not easily cause panic." Roland was speechless for a moment. He had nothing to add. This plan was very mature with the current technology, and it took into account the whole process from breeding to harvesting. If a rubber factory was built outside the mountain, the production and processing would be covered. Especially this kind of modern, flowing line of slaughter, which was worthy of the concept learned from the dream world. However, was it a bit overkill to use the precious magic core and Celine's lifelong research as a crude butcher's knife? Even if you can't find the chosen one and activate the instrument of divine retribution, you don't have to give up like this. No, Roland suddenly found a problem. How many rubber worms can this farm hold? It is estimated to be about 100,000, but given their breeding speed, it will take about a year to fill up this new farm. What about the corpses after the mucus is collected? He asked. Where are you going to transport them? This was not a small problem. Roland had seen in a documentary that a modern chicken farm produced hundreds of tons of chicken manure every day. A little careless handling would cause serious soil and water pollution. Once the scale was enlarged, any small detail could cause great trouble. God's punishment witches could carry the corpses now, but if the worms multiplied to more than 10,000, it would be easy to kill them, but not so easy to clean up. If the corpses could not be disposed of in time, they would definitely cause a catastrophic impact. Don't worry, Your Majesty. Pasha chuckled. Fran and the others don't refuse anyone. In fact, the consumption of the 3 worm carriers to dig with all their strength was a bit shocking. Gurgle, after understanding the meaning of this sentence, Nightingale made a sound like her stomach was moving. Ah. Okay. Now Roland finally understood why there was a small door at the entrance, but there was a superfluous reason to install a large fence. Chapter 1077. After visiting the farm, Roland went to the rubber worm laboratory. The 30-square-meter room looked like an ancient wizard's alchemy room. There was a row of rubber buckets filled with mucus on the wall, and the solidified milky white glue was everywhere. A large pot was full of burnt rubber blocks, giving off an unpleasant smell. Only God knew what they had put into it. The long-handled ladles, buckets, and stirrers used in the experiment enhanced the smell. If they had added a few toads and bats, it would have been a perfect restoration. Your Majesty, Kyle Sichi nodded to show his respect. I think I've found what you wanted. Roland noticed his pale face and the gauze wrapped around his fingers. Are you hurt? It's just a small problem. It doesn't matter. He waved his hand and handed over a glass of light red mucus. Your Majesty, please have a look. Kyle turned the glass upside down, but the liquid did not spill out. Instead, it slowly wriggled along the wall and formed a soft hemispherical mass at the mouth of the glass. Roland's eyes lit up. He reached out to catch the jelly-like mass, but was stopped by the chief alchemist. No, Your Majesty. He took back the glass. This thing is corrosive. I remember that rubber worm mucus should be non-toxic and harmless, Roland said, raising his eyebrows. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been used to make food bags and straws. But after mixing it with blood, it did change its nature. Blood? Roland was slightly stunned and could not help but look at his fingers. Was the wound on your hand for the experiment? Of course not, it was just an accident, Kyle said while stroking his beard. Even if I was crazy, I wouldn't go so far as to use myself as an experiment. The path of chemistry is so long, and I still hope to go further. After listening to Kyle's explanation, Roland finally understood the process of the discovery of the new colloid. The solidification of rubber worm mucus came from the mixture of glandular secretions, and according to the difference in the ratio of the two, biological rubber with different hardness could be formed. But they were not mobile, and once consolidated, they could not be changed. At first, according to his experience in chemical experiments, Kyle added various elements or acid and alkali liquids in groups, but he could not change the final result. After that, he further expanded the selection of materials, from complex inorganic salts to organic substances, to observe the effect. Although many interesting special colloids were found in the process, he still could not get the new gel that Roland wanted. Until an accident happened. When he cut the waste rubber strip, he accidentally cut his finger, and the dripping blood contaminated a cup of experimental sample. The cup suddenly emitted a large amount of white gas, melting the bird beak mushroom into a pool of yellow liquid. The solution had also turned into a semi-coagulated gelatinous substance. Its biggest feature is that it can retain the characteristics of the mixed materials. Kyle threw the gel into the furnace, and it immediately emitted a bright light. The flame also rose several feet high, unlike the rubber block from before, which slowly turned black and finally turned into a pile of powder. I only added a spoonful of grease. Burning it alone might not be able to achieve such an effect, but I can say that it's better than what you requested. Although the old alchemist sounded tired, his tone was filled with excitement. Looking at the exuberant flames, Kyle's eyes also seemed to have a group of flames burning. He had already imagined the scene of this gel being used in large quantities in his mind. Napalm was what Roland was trying to make. It was originally made from gasoline and special thickeners. Compared to the liquid fuel that had an extremely low flash point, was flammable and explosive, and was difficult to adhere to, not only was it much safer to use, but it was also more lethal. When ignited with explosives, it could instantly create a large area of burning. Not only would it be very difficult to get rid of it, but at the same time, the blazing fire would also accelerate the consumption of oxygen, causing people to suffocate to death. When he saw that the slime of the rubber worm had a similar solidifying property, he began to think about it. If he could completely fuse the slime with the kindling and make it burn, he could get a simple but brutal weapon. After all, the red mist was afraid of fire. During the Tequila era, the most troublesome thing for the Union were the outposts that had already been built. The red mist covering a small area made the blessed army helpless. They could only rely on the witches who had the ability to isolate or clear the mist to lead them forward slowly, and the task of dismantling the mist storage towers fell to the common army. Often, after a battle, the blessed army would pay a great price because they could not move flexibly, and the common people would never return. It was under such a cruel trade-off that every outpost built by the demons could weaken the power of the Union until the latter could no longer stop the actions of the demons and was finally dragged down by the demons from all directions. If they could have the ability to set fire at will, the threat of the enemy outposts would be greatly reduced, and the red mist that the demons relied on for survival would become a noose around their necks. It was probably because of the deep impression of the defeat that Pasha and the witches were so concerned about the rubber worms, especially Althea. At first, she was quite critical of the unknown insects raised in the third border city, but after Roland explained the idea of solid fuel weapons to her, her attitude changed completely, and even her tone when she mentioned the worms was different. Now, Roland did not have to fight the demons at close range. Before all the moving targets disappeared, he would not let the First Army leave the range of the artillery. Therefore, the incendiary bombs were more of an auxiliary attack method, a product of the "don't put all your eggs in one basket" mentality. Without them, the entire strategic plan would not be affected, and with them, they could save some gunpowder and reduce the production pressure of the chemical plant. Under this premise, it was naturally good that Kyle Sichi could find something, but the problem was, blood is not a material that is easy to obtain. "Please rest assured, Your Majesty," the alchemist replied. "It doesn't have to be human blood. The blood of cattle, sheep, and other animals can also change its nature. I've tested this. The only condition is that it must be released just now." This made Roland feel a lot more relieved, but then came the second question. Why blood? This. Kyle was speechless for a moment. "I think it may have something to do with the worms themselves," Pasha continued. "Although it is no longer controlled by the multi-eyed monster, its instinct is still there, which is to capture and store prey. I'm afraid fresh blood is one of the conditions." This speculation is quite reasonable, he thought. Obviously, the multi-eyed monster doesn't want food, so storing it in its original form or in a gelatinous state may not make much difference to it. "Then start the weapon test as soon as possible," Roland ordered. "Since we have the ideal raw material, the next step should not take much time. You can leave the rest to the colleagues in King's City. After all, as you said, the path of chemistry is very long, and it is right to pay attention to rest." "Yes, Your Majesty, Kyle said with his hand on his chest. I have another idea. Pasha suddenly said. What is it? Roland looked at her. Maybe we can take a special audience with us during the weapon test. She leisurely swayed her main tentacles and said. Roland immediately realized who Pasha was referring to. Is that guy still alive? Since he did not take advantage of the chaotic period of soul fusion to get more information, he did not expect to pry open the mouth of the senior demon. Now that it had fallen into the hands of the Tequila Witches, it could either choose to commit suicide or be tortured to death by its enemies. He thought that it had already become a ghost. It didn't go on a hunger strike. As long as you send it food, it will eat it up, Pasha said concisely. This showed that it did not want to die at all. He did not surrender, nor did he confess. It was waiting for the moment when the human race completely failed and it regained its freedom. No matter how slim the hope was, it was still holding on. Was it because it felt that it was not worth dying in the hands of the worms? Chapter 1078. Grey Castle, the Old King's City, the Grand Theatre in the inner city. Warm applause came from outside the study, signifying the end of another outstanding performance. Cajun Fells had also come to an end. He took off his glasses and rubbed his tired eyes. Then he closed the script and put it back in the cabinet beside the table. The title on the spine was The Wolf Princess. Also in the cabinet were The Witch Story, New City, Dawn, and so on. These were the farewell gifts that May had given him before he left Neverwinter. Although many people in the troupe thought it was a blatant mockery, he accepted all of them and read them several times when he returned to the theater. It was not because the script itself was brilliant, the creator was undoubtedly a newbie, and the arrangement of the scenes was very straightforward, basically at the beginner stage of explaining the story clearly. It was because if he did not do this, there was nothing else he could do. Cajun found that he had lost the desire to write. Whenever he picked up the pen, the scene in the magic movie would appear in his mind. In the past, this stage should have belonged to the Grand Theatre. He could not imagine the positions of the actors and the placement of the scenery. It was like how he could not be satisfied with the sweetness of dew after tasting honey. In the magic movie, the whole world became a stage for the performance. There was no gap between the audience and the actors. This shocking scene opened a new door for him, but he was soon shut out. Cajun could not turn back even if he only took a glance at the stage. To be precise, it was not that he did not want to write anymore, but he could not help thinking about the magic movie. For example, the close-up of the prince's smile when he first met the princess, the bleak background when they parted. All these thoughts kept surging in his mind. The magic movie had given him many things he wanted to try, but none of them was related to the story of the theater. It was this contradiction that made Cajun Fells very uncomfortable. Only when he read through the script could he temporarily forget these worries. However, he also knew that this could only alleviate his anxiety. May was not willing to tell him, and the administrative office did not reply to him. This meant that Neverwinter had completely shut the door to him. He knew that he would have to suffer until he found a new channel to understand the magic movie. At this moment, a maid knocked on the door. "Master, there are a few letters for you." Cajun closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. "Leave it outside. I'll look at it later." After the play, Rentgen, Egripo, and the others would usually come to the study to discuss their thoughts and questions about the performance. He planned to recover some energy before that. But, there is a letter with the mark of Greycastle's royal family on it. "You told me that if it's a letter from Neverwinter, I must hand it to." Before the maid could finish, Cajun opened the door. "Where is the letter?" Startled, the latter hurriedly handed over a stack of letters and watched as the dramatist picked the letter from the royal family and stuffed all the other letters back to him. Then the door was shut. Cajun went back to the desk and broke the wax seal eagerly. It was a letter from King Wimbledon to him. Did the king finally know that Cajun's troupe had come to Neverwinter and wanted to present a play for the coronation? If he could get in touch with the king of Grey Castle, wouldn't he be able to find the magic movie? Cajun suppressed his excitement, unfolded the letter and began to read. How many roses did you get today? Agrippina asked jokingly on the way to the study. About 10. I didn't count them. Renkin shrugged. Anyway, fewer than before. Although I don't care. If those admirers were to hear this, I'm afraid their hearts would shatter into two. Agrippina laughed. It's inevitable that the number of people will decrease. His Majesty sent half of the nobles to the mines and this place became the old king's city. Naturally, fewer people will come to watch the play. But as long as the city is still there, everything will gradually return to how it was before. I think it's good enough that there are still people sending flowers, Benny said, twitching her mouth. There used to be 6 troops, but now there are only 3 left. I hope we won't become the next one. Renkin's expression also became a little emotional. Yes, that war really changed a lot, ahem, ladies, we also have to see the benefits. Agrippina coughed twice. Wasn't the rapid expansion of Cajun's troop because they recruited people from the 3 troops? We can't control the succession of the throne, but it has happened so many times in history. Everyone is still alive, isn't it? Anyway, cheer up. Teacher is still waiting for us. Don't let him see us being discouraged. At the mention of Cajun Fells, everyone nodded involuntarily. Teacher Cajun seemed to have aged a few years since he came back from Neverwinter. It was all May's fault. She refused to reveal the origin of the magic movie and even used the possibility that it might be related to the secret. Since things had come to this, they naturally had to work harder. Teacher, sorry to disturb, Agrippina walked to the study and pushed open the door. He was slightly stunned. The atmosphere in the room seemed to be a little strange. Cajun was not sitting on the soft couch waiting for them as he usually did. Instead, he was standing in front of the table in a daze. After a long while, he looked at them and said, "Come in." "Teacher, what happened?" Bernice also noticed that Cajun was acting strange. "There's a letter from Neverwinter. It's from His Majesty." Cajun picked up the letter from the table and handed it to everyone. "Take a look. Is this okay?" "It's okay." Agrippina took the letter after getting a nod. The others immediately gathered around him. Looking at their expectant faces, Cajun sighed inwardly. Obviously, they were thinking the same thing as he was when he read the letter. Someone had secretly obstructed the transmission of the news, causing the troop to return to the old king's city without accomplishing anything. Now that His Majesty had found out, the person who had obstructed them would be in trouble. He had guessed the beginning correctly, but not the ending. His Majesty had indeed satisfied his curiosity. In the letter, he had briefly explained the principle of the magic movie. The key to the magic movie was an instrument created and activated by witches, which could record the scene of an incident. However, witches alone were not enough. It had to use some ancient relics. These things were extremely rare and could only be found by chance. As a result, the instrument was also extremely rare. It was a priceless and rare item. Cajun wrote straightforwardly, "It's the eve of a dangerous war. All the resources of the territories must be prioritized for the survival of Grey Castle, and the magic movie is no exception. I believe you've seen the shock it brings. It plays an extremely important role in spreading ideas and awareness. It's a pity that it can't be used in plays that have nothing to do with national policy. But this situation won't last forever. When the kingdom ushers in true peace, the magic movie will eventually become a new form of drama that everyone can film. By then, I believe that you and your troupe will be able to produce excellent works." If that was the case, they could only feel helpless. Unfortunately, His Majesty did not think so. He had received the notice from the administrative office from the very beginning, and the person who had rejected the new script was none other than Roland Wimbledon himself. That was the biggest blow to Cajun. It turned out that it was just his wishful thinking to present a gift for the king's ascension to the throne. In fact, Cajun did not take the preparation of Cajun's troop seriously at all. If the king did not like their new play, the promise of producing excellent works in the letter would be nothing more than a cliché. Chapter 1079. After reading the letter, everyone fell into a strange silence. After a while, Bennis muttered unwillingly, "I knew I shouldn't have expected Prince Roland to bless me. Thinking about the places he frequented in the king's city and the rumors about him, I thought the ascension would make him." Shoo! Agrippa pulled Roland's arm. "Be careful with what you say. All the nobles here are His Majesty's supporters. Even if they're not, they'll pretend to be. If they hear you say that, you'll be in trouble." Rentgen sighed and said, "I guess we'll never set foot in the new king's city again." "That's not bad. We're quite popular here, aren't we?" Agrippa comforted her. "Cajun troop can be regarded as a first-class troop anywhere except Neverwinter. It won't be a problem for us to make a living. The magic movie will come to the old king's city sooner or later," Cajun suddenly said. "I've been reading May's plays over and over again these days and found that they all have one thing in common, which is that the audience is subtly influenced by a fictional background, and that background is the future planned by His Majesty. Since it's a tool to spread the king's ideas and will, how can it only be shown in Neverwinter? By then, will you still be so confident in your plays?" Agrippa was stunned. We can go to other places, such as the Kingdom of Dawn." "Teacher, as long as you ask, the theater there will be willing to let us stay there." Cajun shook his head and said, "I won't go to the Kingdom of Dawn." "Then." The dramatist looked up and said, "I want to go to Neverwinter again." "What? Teacher?" The three of them turned pale with fright. "It takes at least a month for the troupe to go back and forth to Neverwinter, and during this time, we'll barely have any income." Agrippa hurriedly tried to dissuade them. "It's fine for us, but I'm afraid that the newcomers and apprentices won't be able to make ends meet, which will affect the troupe's stability." Cajun, of course, knew this. It would be fine if the troupe had a fixed theater to perform in. Otherwise, they would have to prepare all the props and materials by themselves, which was not an easy job. However, what he meant was not what they thought he meant. "I won't take the troupe with me." This time, the apprentices were stunned for a longer time. "Then, what are you going to do?" "To compete for the magic movie," Cajun said slowly. Although His Majesty said that magic movies will become popular sooner or later, he didn't mention a specific time. 10 years or 20 years. In any case, I can't wait that long. Even if it's only 5 years, the Star Flower Troupe will reach an unprecedented height. By that time, it'll be too late for us to catch up and start from scratch. The best time to catch up with a wave was right before it leaped out of the sea. The problem is that His Majesty already has the Star Flower Troupe." Bennis murmured. "In the beginning, Star Flower Troupe only consisted of Star and Flower." Cajun glanced at his disciples and said, "Plus, I haven't changed my mind. An outstanding performance must be honed behind the scenes to reach its best level. Since Star Flower can't handle the drama arranged by His Majesty alone, we might be able to solve it. If I can beat him in the theater, I might be able to get a chance to perform in the magic movie." "You're going to act in those plays?" Agrippa asked incredulously. "If I want to get one part, I have to give up the other." Cajun nodded. "But even if it's a play, it's not a reason to slack off." "I'll do my best." Cajun paused for a moment. "Of course, His Majesty may reject this request. In that case, I'll join the Star Flower Troupe in my own name. Do any of you want to come with me?" No one answered. Cajun did not know whether they were still in a daze or unwilling to leave the old king's city. Maybe both of them. Cajun was not surprised. In fact, he was shocked when the idea popped up in his mind. Just as Agrippa had said, even if he went to the Kingdom of Dawn, he would be able to gain a high position with his reputation. It would not be an easy choice for him to give up on this. Moreover, he was old. His memory was not as good as before, and his legs were not flexible enough. What kind of roles could he play on the stage? Usually, he would play unimportant supporting roles. No matter how good he would still be a joke in the eyes of others. It could be said that from the moment he became successful and moved from the front of the stage to behind the scenes, he never thought that he would make a comeback one day. Since His Majesty could not accept his script, and he could not write stories like New City and Dawn, then he could only give it a try as an actor. Was it too incredible? Cajun looked at his apprentice's expressions as if he could read their minds. Yes, it was indeed incredible. After making this decision, he felt a sense of relief that he had not felt for a long time. He was indeed old, but strangely, his heart seemed to have returned to more than 30 years ago, when he first went to the theater with his family and watched a play. At this moment, he could not suppress his excitement and impulses, which were almost exactly the same as when he was young. He had countless reasons to stop himself, but in the face of this possible opportunity, all his reasons were useless. Agrippo has been with me for the longest time, and he knows how to run a troupe. When I'm not here, he'll temporarily manage it, Cajun said calmly. Recently, there are many talented newcomers in the troupe. Let them perform more. As long as the plays are rehearsed normally, there won't be any problems. Teacher. The three of them wanted to say something, but Cajun stopped them. He followed the voice of his youth. That voice was telling him. He wanted to act in the magic movie. In the city of Neverwinter, the western region of Greycastle. As Roland had expected, the speed at which the napalm could be weaponized was astonishing after the right materials were found. In just 1 week, the Ministry of Chemical Industry had put the trial product in front of him. It was about 10 iron buckets with a diameter of 30 centimeters and a height of about 1 meter. There were detonating explosives in the center of the iron buckets and they were connected by wires. Your Majesty, this is the city-burning Skyfire Thunder I designed, Retnine said excitedly. It has 3 layers, namely, the special snow powder layer, the combustion-supporting layer, and the fuel layer. In order to make the fire spread more widely, the 3 layers are not simply wrapped. Instead, they are like inverted mushrooms. The snow powder fire will hit the combustion-supporting layer and the fuel layer like an erupting volcano. And Retnine, who used to be the chief alchemist of the alchemist workshop in King's City, probably felt that it was not easy to get the opportunity to replace Kyle Sichi. His many designs really made Roland's eyes light up. In addition to the directional ignition configuration and the combustion-supporting layer, Retnine also mentioned the idea of delayed detonation for the first time. Using the precise and controllable characteristics of electric detonators, multiple explosives could be detonated in sequence to reduce the impact on each other and increase the lethality. Roland had to admit that this group of people who stood at the top of the industry had extraordinary talents. For example, Retnine seemed to be particularly enthusiastic about the use of chemicals to make explosions. The only thing that made Roland doubt was Retnine's style and taste in naming. However, this was not a big problem. After all, he would be the only one who had the right to name them after they were officially equipped with the army. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.